Message is being broadcast by the Department of Defense of the Republic. At 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, multiple unidentified objects were confirmed to have entered Earth's atmosphere.
Discovery Houston, 20 seconds to LOS Idris.
Roger, nice to be in orbit. The first message that comes to you is you are a divine being. You matter. You count. You come from realms of unimaginable power and light, and you will return to those realms.
The vast stretches of the unknown and the unanswered and the unfinished still far outstrip our collective comprehension.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Broadcasting from Forest Tower Studios, all the way from the Deep South. Now, here is your host, Joe Root.
Well, how are you? Broadcasting from a shack on a hill in the Mossy Creek bottoms of Cane Creek, Arkansas. This is Lighting the Void, and I'm Joe Roop. Welcome back. It is Thursday, the 17th. Tonight, live on the Fringe FM, we're going to be talking about a subject that I think is very, very cool. Tolkien, Carl Jung, the archetypes, maybe even dreams and astrology. We're going to try to put all this stuff together with Becca Tarnas. That's our guest tonight. This is a subject that I think is, God, it's interesting, and I'll tell you why. We've been exploring this stuff for a long time now, and it wasn't until I went on Gordon White's, when I started taking his courses about journeying. So he's got a whole course about journeying, and it really opened my eyes to understanding what this is when we go out of body, or we lucid dream, or we work with archetypes and symbols. I used to think they were all separate things, but now I'm not so sure. And we've brought up J.R.R. Tolkien on the show before, as well as Carl Jung a few times, and it just seems like there's a great mystery there. And how are we going to put all this stuff together? And I think our guest tonight is really going to help us look in depth at this subject even more. Now, don't forget, we're live on the Fringe FM 5 nights a week, 9 p.m. Pacific to midnight, every night, Monday through Friday. Tomorrow night's going to be open lines. I think we're going to have the rabble-rouser, the skeptic, back on tomorrow night with Alex Exum, and a surprise guest, too, I hope is going to come on. I'm not sure, so I don't want to get your hopes up, but I hope they come on. And this show's brought to you by GetTheTea.com. Right now, the biggest deal you can get over there. Make sure you get your tea, though. Make sure you get your Super Strength tea, but D365 is the deal. 4-pack. Go get it. If you're into CBD oil, get Ancient Life Oil. Get the best. AncientLifeOil.com. Don't get caught unawares, so go to PrepareWithTheFringe.com. You get free shipping over there, too, for anything over $100. If you go get any of this stuff, make sure you tell them that we sent you. The campaign I'm hearing that we opened up yesterday to help a listener of ours. I'm not sure what's going on. I got a message today from a listener that said they tried to donate to the unexpected death of Brian Conlon, and so a lot of you have been donating, and that's fantastic. Please keep doing that if you can, because that's one of our listeners, and they need your help. But for some reason, somebody tried to donate, and it's not going through, so I'll figure out what's going on and get back to you on that. I promise. If you want, you can go grab a shirt. Go get a shirt. If you get a shirt, when you get your shirt, show me the picture. I got a listener right now, and you know who you are, who is refusing to put their picture online after they got their shirt. And the problem is because they know how good they look in it. A Lighting the Void shirt is probably the best thing you can wear, especially for the fall right now. Go grab a hoodie, help us out, get some swag, donate. It's all there on the website. And go check out UFO Seekers, too. Season 4. It's on YouTube. It's time to watch it. It's time to get involved with this again. UFOseekers.com, always backed and supported by us. The best work is at youtube.com/UFO Seekers. Get involved with the drama on Twitter as we fight the good fight in ufology with UFO Seekers at UFO Seekers on Twitter. Now, our guest Becca Tarnas is a scholar, artist, and editor of Archai, the Journal of Archetypal Cosmology. And she received her doctorate in philosophy and religion from the California Institute of Integral Studies with her dissertation titled The Back of Beyond, the Red Books of Jung and J.R.R. Tolkien. Her research interests include depth psychology, literature, philosophy, and the ecological imagination. She teaches in the Jungian psychology and archetypal studies program at Pacifica Graduate Institute and for online platforms such as Nura Learning, PsicoCymática, and the Astrology Hub. Becca lives in Nevada City, California, where she has an astrological counseling practice. Very interesting. Thank you for joining Lighting the Void, Becca. It's really cool to have you here.
It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I am kind of stoked about this because I don't know much about how to put this stuff together. Like, I've had another guest on, and we've talked about Tolkien and the elves and all the characters. There's definitely something in those stories that I feel really touches everybody on a soul level. But the more we've talked about it on the show, it just feels like, man, I don't really understand it. You know, I don't know if it's real, what's going on, if there was some type of old or ancient earth that we don't know about, or if these are just archetypes. And I think you're the person to help us out with this. So, yeah, what got you involved with this in the first place, though?
I love synthesizing things. I love bringing disparate ideas together and seeing how they allow us to see something different. And in terms of Tolkien and the stories that he wrote of Middle-earth, you're absolutely right. So many people have this experience of being fully drawn in, or when they read these stories, they're so immersive. You can see the landscapes, you can see the people, you can see the story unfold. And of course, this is the case in many great stories. But there is something very profound about Tolkien with that. And it brings up for me questions around, you know, what is the nature of the imagination? Where do these stories come from?
Yeah, that's where I'm wondering too, because the elves feel real. And the closest thing that I can get to that is, I guess, when I look at, because I study the occult, right? And then when I look at angelic names, and then I look at the names of these elves, they're really close, right? There's some type of power there, or some type of something that our soul tries to connect to. I don't know, but I know that I've learned through taking Gordon White's journeying course and studying Carl Jung and stuff that when we go into the depths of our imagination, whether we want to sit there and talk about what's real and what's not, either way, we're having that experience and it does change our lives. So doesn't that make it real in a way?
I definitely think so. I think that the word real needs to be expanded, in part to include imaginal reality, to affirm that the imagination itself, just like the mind or the intellect, is actually a valid way of knowing. And with the elves, as you're talking about, that wasn't the first name that Tolkien gave to them, elves. He actually first called them gnomes. And, you know, for us now, when we hear the word gnome, we picture like a little garden gnome. But what he actually meant by that was those who know. So gnome coming from the word gnosis, or to know. And you can think of like the Gnostics, for example. And that the elves were originally these beings that were really just those who know. Well, we can find elves or gnomes or these kind of beings in so many different kinds of reports of visionary experience, whether it's Carl Jung's Red Book experience, where he encounters the Kabiri, who he calls the gnomes as well, or even Terence McKenna talking about, you know, in the DMT state, talking about machine elves, and or again uses the term gnomes as well. So there's this common language that people are drawing on to describe these beings that are encountered not in the external world, but the internal world of imagination.
Okay. And so are you finding that through your studies that people are running into the same beings when they do this kind of stuff? Like, I know I'm going down this dream world thing for some reason with you, but do you find that people are running into the same types of beings when they get into their imagination, or is it always more of an archetypal thing?
Well, it's a complex question, and let me see how I can best approach it, because when we encounter an archetype, it comes in a particular form. And I think, one of the best examples of this is Carl Jung's own experiences that he recorded in his Red Book, where he would, using the practice of active imagination, go into these fantasies where the material would just be emerging. And he would encounter different figures with various names: Elijah, Salome, Philemon. And the question is, okay, well, are these figures that are particular to Jung? Are they facets of his own individual psyche? Or are they archetypes? Are they something completely universal? And in holding that question, I would want to posit, well, maybe they're both. Maybe they are informed by archetypes. But when we interact with them, we kind of call forward a particular face to that archetype. Just in the same way that when we interact with people in the outer world, we may have some kind of relationship with a particular person. Let's say it's a really positive relationship, but someone else we know maybe has a kind of negative relationship to them. Sure, they have the same name and they look the same, but two different people can have a radically different experience of the same person.
Yes.
And so I think that's maybe also applicable in the inner world, and that it is an encounter with an archetype, but it's not the whole archetype. It's not the full, pure archetype. It's rather the face of it that's presented to us based on who we are.
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does, because there's a lot of variables in there. I'm getting, there's us, there's the archetype, there's the set and setting, the situation, the plot, So,
yeah,
it doesn't always have to be the same thing or some set formula.
Exactly.
Okay, so can you help me understand one of your studies, which I don't, it's ecological imagination. What does that mean?
That's a good question. I think I'm still figuring that one out too. So the ecological imagination is a term that I'm using to refer to our relationship with the earth, with ecology. My background is in environmental studies, actually, and before I ever started going down the path of depth psychology and archetypal astrology and all these things, I was pretty solidly situated in studying the environment and the ecological crisis. And what I found, and I think a lot of people now are realizing this, is that to communicate to people that we're in an ecological crisis, that the rate of species extinction, that the CO2 levels in the atmosphere are too high, that, there's a fresh water crisis, all of these different things, it's very hard to communicate that to people simply with facts and fear. People tend to shut off psychologically because we don't really have the emotional capacity and the psychological capacity to take that information in and alter our lives in any significant way. I mean, we're embedded in systems that it's very hard to adjust. So I started thinking about how, what if we approach this differently? And instead of facts and a fear-based approach, what if it was story? What if we approached this through story and the power of the imagination to be in sympathetic relationship to the earth, to our local ecology, And when we allow our imagination to open, and this can be applied in so many different ways, whether it's a kind of compassionate relationship to the animals that live, in our neighborhood, in our closest regions, or whether it's as broad as imagining what it would be like to be at the birth of the universe, and imagine yourself through the evolution of the universe. Well, so if you do that, suddenly you have the potential, at least, to feel more connected to the cosmos, connected to the earth, because there's a recognition that we as human beings are intimately part of the earth. We're not a separate species. We're not an anomaly. We have evolved and emerged from this earth and in this cosmos, just like everything else. So I think the imagination is what allows us to be in that kind of open relationship to the earth itself, to our local ecology, and to the cosmos. And so that's a kind of shorthand way of referring to that as the ecological imagination. But I think that story is such an important part of that. What kind of stories do we tell about our current moment?
Right. Like that's what I've said that to so many people. Like, we are in the age of the storyteller, I believe. And I mean, we've always been there, campfire stories but when you get on, excuse me, weather's getting to me, but when you get on, when you look at the top podcasts, right, or the top, I guess, listen to audio, it's always stories. People want to hear your story. They want it, whether it's fact or fiction, they just want the story. They want the details. They want the vision. They want to imagine things for themselves too. And I think I'm starting to understand what you're talking about, because are you saying that since we're kind of attached to the cosmos and the earth and everything, we're just a part of it, that if we use our imagination, we can actually change things, possibly the way things are based on, our imagination, kind of like how, I guess you could say, magic works, or some people call it magic, but by using your imagination, you trigger certain things to happen,
Exactly. I think, something that Carl Jung says, everything that we see that's been created in the world around us had to be imagined first. Everything. Yeah. And so in that way, if we can't imagine ourselves through our current moment and imagine a different way of building a civilization, having an economy, relating to each other, and if we don't reimagine that, then it seems like we're headed in a pretty dark direction. But we have that capacity. It's an extraordinary ability of the human being to be able to imagine.
Right.
And I think that's something that's really been denigrated in modernity, the imagination. And we think of it as something that's, it's just made up. It's just pretend. We don't trust the imagination. But if you really delve into it, it's this extraordinary source. Oh. And it seems to be coming from beyond us. Because if you speak to artists or authors or, creative individuals of all kinds, most of them will say, when speaking of their art or speaking of their stories, that they don't know where it came from. It came through them. Certainly J.R.R. Tolkien spoke this way when he talked about writing his stories. He always would say, I've long ceased to invent. I would just wait until it writes itself. Or he would say it was more like discovery rather than making it up. He would say that he felt the story was already there somewhere, and he just had to uncover it. And so many people describe this. So where is it coming from? It's certainly not coming from us as individuals. We're shaping it as individuals. And that's the power of the artist or the author. We get to choose the words that say it, or the medium, or how we kind of shape or direct what's coming through. But it seems as though that source of inspiration is beyond us as individual human beings.
Right. Yeah, like if you think about it, especially when it comes to technology, like somebody, when they, like the telephone, when there was no telephone, somebody had to imagine, hey, you know what? Like, I want to talk to somebody that's not here, right? I want to talk to somebody that's in another country. And everybody looks at him like, what? You know, that's a crazy fairy tale. But it's not really. It just had to come into formation, right?
Yeah.
I get what you're saying.
That reminds me of something that I heard Irvin Laszlo say at a conference a couple of years ago. He said that there are certain things that we say today that wouldn't have even been conceivable to someone 100 years ago. And the example he gave was, I just watched a movie on my phone this morning.
Right, yeah.
Now imagine if you heard that 100 years ago. It's like, okay, first of all, film has just been invented not too long before. It's definitely not widespread. How could it be related to your phone? But someone imagined that possibility. And here we are. We all have these tiny devices now.
Okay, so now I'm starting to really think here. So so I understand this fundamental, and I've kind of understand this from a Western point of view, like the four worlds of the Kabbalah, where things kind of start at a certain level and they come down. If Carl Jung and J.R.R. Tolkien, do you think that there's a possibility? Well, let's just look at Tolkien. Do you think there was a possibility that he was seeing something coming down that we needed to hear? Like, first of all, it was like a divine message to show us maybe how we needed to live, or the type of characters that we needed to be, or maybe a type of world that can coexist better, or something. Do you think there was like a purposeful reason behind it, maybe?
I want to rewind a little bit, if that's okay.
Sure.
Before attempting to answer that. And I don't know if I can answer that definitively. But you brought up Tolkien and Jung. And if you don't mind, I might just mention a little bit of why I look at the two of them in relationship to each other.
Okay.
So the research that I did for my Ph.D. was looking at a synchronicity between Carl Jung's Red Book, which was this very large book that he created. It's bound in 2 covers of red leather. And he recorded in it these fantasies that he experienced starting in 1913. And he wrote them in beautiful calligraphy, and he illustrated it exquisitely. It's an amazing thing to see. Yeah. And then I explored that in parallel to what J.R.R. Tolkien created. Now, in the context of The Lord of the Rings and his other stories of Middle-earth, those stories are written down in a book called the Red Book of Westmarch. And it's, first of all, just the similarity of the two titles, the Red Books. One is an actual physical red book out in the external world. One is set within a story, but it encompasses all of Tolkien's stories of Middle-earth. And a number of years ago now, the thought kind of occurred to me, well, what if there's more in common other than the synchronicity of these two titles? And so I started to explore parallels between them. And I found all these extraordinary parallels in timing. The beginning of Tolkien writing his stories right around 1913, right before the First World War started, exactly in tandem with Jung's Red Book. And then all these other similarities in content, similar drawings and paintings, similar text or figures that show up. So the more I researched into this, the more I was just blown away by all these parallels between these two Red Books. But, you know, at the end of the day, even with a lot of parallels, and I'll add, Tolkien and Jung did not know each other, so there was no external influence. What does that point to? And so that's when I started thinking about, well, Jung's Red Book is based on his experiences and his experiences of the imagination. And if you delve into Tolkien's letters, he's saying some pretty similar things as Jung is. And one starts to get the sense that both men were, you could say, journeying inward into what could be called the imaginal realm, or what Tolkien called fairy, or even in some ways what Jung called the collective unconscious. So I'm laying all this out because in response to your question, what does that kind of experience tell us? For Jung, you know, a lot of his experiences could have been seen as prophetic, but he didn't set himself up as a prophet saying, you know, this is what's going to happen and so forth. He was more interested in understanding how it was even possible that he had these visionary experiences. He was more interested in the vision-making faculty or the imagination than the content even of the fantasies. So I think one of the most important things is to recognize that something like this is even possible, and to reclaim that there is an inner world, that there is an imaginal world, and that it is real. We've been talking about, you know, what's real, what isn't, and that it's real, but not in a physical sense. It's real in more of an ephemeral sense, not totally abstract, but rather it's kind of this realm in between the world of abstract thought and between the physical world. Mm-hmm. And these ideas around the imaginal realm, a lot of them I'm taking from the scholar Henri Corbin. He was a French scholar. He was a contemporary with Carl Jung, and he wrote a lot about the mundus imaginalis, which is the world of the imagination. And he's a Sufi scholar and getting his information from mystics like Ibn Arabi. So there's a kind of spiritual foundation behind some of these ideas, but they're extraordinarily applicable to the experiences that Jung and possibly Tolkien had. Now, I know I'm still holding in mind your question.
Well, we got to take a break here too, so
okay.
I'm totally getting what you're saying though. Like, I jumped way too far ahead with that because I passed up some pretty important stuff there when it comes to this realm, these inner realms, like that have always been just passed off when we were children as, oh, it's just your imagination. But yeah, it's far more than that, I think. I think you're right. And we've been shown that by Carl Jung and even Tolkien. Mm-hmm. We'll be right back with Becca Tarnas. Yeah. More Lighting the Void coming up.
This is Corbin, son of the one and only Joe Root, and you're listening to The Fringe FM.
Did you know that qualified patients can access medical cannabis in all 50 states? Cannasense is a medical cannabis collective that helps patients in all 50 states gain access to cannabis medication. Cannasense does this with a streamlined process and strict compliance with the Compassionate Use Act of 1996, the Affordable Care Act, and the U.S. Constitution. It is important for each patient to understand the legalities involved, the costs, and the benefits of cannabis medication. Through truth, legalization, and education, the medical benefits of cannabis will of plant recreational perceptions and the real vision for change will be realized. Let the people and their personal doctors take control of their medical cannabis decisions before the greed of big business takes over. The tipping point for change is today, and CannaSense is ready to lead the charge and enable legal access for all qualified patients to medical cannabis through its proven system. For more information, go to thefringe.fm/care or click the banner on the website today.
I think by now we can get the information.
I love magic, and on Lighting the Void, each and every week, you will get to hear shows about magic, mysticism, and many other subjects that stretch your mind and imagination. So when I got my mind on the magic and the magic on my mind, I listened to Lighting the Void on the Fringe FM. It's magic.
May the gods look with favor upon you.
You're wondering what we're going to do to you, aren't you? I'm getting older and noticing that my body just doesn't work as well as it used to. So I like to keep fit as possible by hitting the gym a few times a week. Recently, I started having a nagging bicep pain, and it got so bad I couldn't even lift the weights. When I was complaining about it to a friend, he told me about angioprim. He said chelation helps remove toxins, heavy metals, and cholesterol in veins and arteries that may cause blockages. You know, after just 1 week of taking angioprim, the pain was gone, and now I'm back in the gym full strength. Scientific research proves the active ingredient in angioprim has superior oral chelation action that helps promote cardiovascular health. So to learn more, go to angioprim.com. That's ANGIOPRIM.com, or talk to a trained consultant. Call Angioprim toll free at 877-882-7221. You'll feel better with more energy. Call 877-882-7221 or go to the website angioprim.com.
Hey, I'm J.M. DeBoard, and when I want to talk about dreams, I look up my man Joe Root and his show, Lighting the Void.
Okay, here we go. AncientLifeOil.com. AncientLifeOil.com. Now, this is for CBD. AncientLifeOil.com. Again, for CBD. Where do I get CBD? AncientLifeOil.com. It's pretty good stuff. Organic, non-GMO. We are the Ferrari of CBDs. AncientLifeOil.com. You know, they say when you mention a person's name 3 times when you first meet, that you're going to remember. So I'd say to you, nice to meet you, AncientLifeOil.com. It's AncientLifeOil.com, right? Nice to know that you help people. AncientLifeOil.com. Think about this. Occasional stress, occasional anxiety, occasional inflammation, occasional stiffness, and intruders that get you down. AncientLifeOil.com. Okay, so I'm going to give you a fact for the day. So Ancient Life Oil does not help you with business deals. Hold on a second. If you feel better, it could help you make a better decision. Okay, I'm wrong. Just remember to go to AncientLifeOil.com.
All right, everyone, this is Justin from the UK. Excuse the chitty. If you're into the Fringe and you want to hear the brass tacks, me old China plate, Joe Roop and his guests on Light in the Void will open your mince pies. You need to shut your north and south and use your 10-speed gears and listen to them bubble. You could hear a Barry Crocker, no Brussels, but he ain't no holy friar. Anyway, you beat a Barnaby Rudge and take a butcher's.
listening to Lighting the Void Radio.
All right, welcome back to Lighting the Void. Tonight our guest, Becca Tarnas, is here. If you want to go to the website, it's BeccaTarnas.com. TarnasBecca. BeccaTarnas.com. For reference, if you're listening on your phone or whatever, just don't do it while you're driving, for heaven's sake. But yeah, so before the break, we were talking about the imagination. I asked a big question about why Tolkien was seeing these things, or why he was making these characters and this incredible realm and this incredible story that perhaps somebody was or something was trying to get us to learn something. And you said, well, let's back up and look. And then we kind of talked about how we've always been taught how the imagination isn't really real, so to speak, but everything that's come into reality has been caused by the imagination. If you think about it, especially what humans have created. So, Carl Jung, you were talking about how Carl Jung started to identify these inner realms. What do you think, it's here for? Like, do you think it, and this is, I'm not asking you for fact, just maybe your intuition here, that do you think that this is a part of us that has been hidden from us for a long time, so we don't come into our own power and realize that who we are and what we can do? Because I feel like that sometimes. Like in my dream journal, I've went back and looked and said, you know, I've got dreams that were showing me what was going to happen to me in the future, also showing me choices that I can make, but yet I've always been taught it's just in my head. It's my imagination. You know what I mean? So there's got to be some kind of tool or power there that we're not tapping into or we don't realize yet.
Mm-hmm. I think that in some ways, you know, what is it there for? That question can best be understood in the context, well, why does the physical world exist? Can we answer that? Why is there a cosmos? And I think that it's really the same kind of question, that an inner world is just as infinite as the outer. Mm-hmm. And so why does it exist? Well, the same reason that the whole cosmos exists. And these are questions that philosophers have been chasing for millennia. And thank goodness they don't have just one answer. But I do think that what you're speaking to is very true, that if we grow up in a culture and a worldview that denies the truth of our inner world, the truth of dreams, the truth of the imagination, of the psyche, of the psychic world, then we are really missing something important. And the thing is, this is something that's been very recently forgotten by just a portion of humanity. It's the development of the modern mind, you could say, that has over time, over several centuries, come to decide that, you know, the things that matter most are what's physical, what's material, what's measurable. Basically, what the scientific paradigm states is all of reality. And because that inner world cannot be seen or measured in the same way as the physical world, then from a particular worldview or perspective, then we can say that just doesn't exist. It's not real. But so many cultures still around the world, and if we look back through time, all of humanity has taken this world very seriously, has taken the world of dreams and visions, the world of potential, as just as real as the outer world. And even, I would say, there's probably an earlier form of human consciousness that wouldn't have even separated it out, that wouldn't have said, oh, there's an external world outside of me, and there's an internal world inside me, and they're divided. An ancient form of human consciousness would look at the physical world and see those inner psychic or ensouled qualities as part of the world itself. So it's only recently, and probably a countable number of generations, where children are raised to no longer believe that their dreams are a reality, or that what they imagine is actually coming from an internal place that has its own kind of reality. So we are really depriving ourselves of something very powerful that, as you said, is pointing us toward a deeper sense of meaning, of connection, and a kind of ground that we're missing in so many ways in modern culture.
Man, I couldn't agree with you more on that. I really couldn't agree with you more on that, because I feel like, we talk about magic on this show quite a bit. We also talk about journeying and the out-of-body experience and learning from it. And everybody just kind of wants to do this now. At least my audience, they're so excited by it. I got a message, and I'll probably play it later, from Jared, who is so happy because they just now started to become lucid. And all his friends in this one place, they listen to the show and they're becoming lucid, and they're starting to understand that this is real. And it's like this journey into that place is far more, I would say, magnificent than the physical realm. I mean, here it seems like we got a lot of limits, right, in the physical realm, but there, I mean, it doesn't seem that way. It seems like the possibilities are limitless, although yet we still do keep running into archetypes and things. But what I'm wondering is, and what I'm starting to learn from Carl Jung a little bit, is that you can, and this is trippy, and I really need you to correct me if I'm wrong here, but you could use the internal realms to affect your external realm, or vice versa. And they like play off each other if you learn how to play with them properly, so to speak.
Definitely. I mean, that's the basis of psychology in so many ways. Why do people go to, work with a psychotherapist? It's not just, at least from a Jungian perspective and an archetypal psychology approach, it's not just to kind of talk about your issues and to work out the details of what happened in your childhood that went wrong. It's to be able to tap into that inner world and to affirm it. And of course that can affect your external life and can absolutely affect how reality unfolds. I think that the inner and the outer world are obviously profoundly interconnected, and maybe we can think of it as, that's a good point that you brought up, that the external world seems to have more limits. And in that way, to draw on an astrological archetype, the physical world is more Saturnian. It's limited, it's defined by mortality and bound by time. It's a world where there is a lot of, pain and suffering and challenge. Not that you don't find that in the inner world too. But there is a Saturnian nature to physical reality. And then when we turn to the inner world of the imaginal, it's more, to use another astrological archetype, it's more Neptunian. It's the realm of potential. It's the wellspring of possibility, the wellspring of images. And it has that capacity to be kind of ever shifting and dynamic and changing, like the flow of water. And so we need both. We need to be able to draw on that wellspring and bring it to affect change in the external world. And maybe vice versa too, to recognize that to be able to engage with the imagination, to bring forward its gifts through, art and poetry and story and so forth, we need to be incarnated. We need to be individuals. It's not just about escaping into some other realm where we're no longer embodied. We need both. And maybe what's so extraordinary about being human is the capacity to go between these worlds, to bridge between worlds.
Yeah, I mean, because say I know somebody that's extremely hurt and fragmented, right? Or maybe I am extremely hurt and fragmented, and I can't deal with society, and I can't relate to people, and I can't have relationships, and etc. Right? Well, that if you're just stuck here, I think, like in this physical realm, you're going to have a hard time, right? But if you knew that there was a way to use your imagination, right? Like really use your imagination, your dreams, or just your imagination, and go what Gordon White calls journeying, right? Go deep inside yourself and create this story to where you're going to fight these demons and etc., or a dragon or something that represents something that you're dealing with. And now all of a sudden, because the symbology was correct, I feel like, that in the physical realm, it's kind of weird because I've even seen this, things start to change for you. And it seems like magic, but it feels more real. It's hard to explain. It feels more real than what we're dealing with right now, to me.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to explain that, right? Like, I just don't know. It's hard to find words for it. So when you look at J.R.R. Tolkien, they both had a red book, right? Tolkien had a red book too. Am I right about that? What was?
Yes, you are.
See, I never read that one. So what was specific or, what was special about Tolkien's red book?
Well, actually, you have read it. It goes by the name The Lord of the Rings.
Oh, okay, well, then I read it then. All right.
You did, yeah.
All right.
So Tolkien's Red Book is called that within the context of the story. So if you recall, and for those who've read The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, in The Hobbit, Bilbo writes down his experiences in a red journal. And this is the book that he's always kind of obsessing over wanting to finish, that he talks about at the beginning of The Lord of the Rings. And by the end of The Lord of the Rings, the story of what has unfolded over the course of those journeys, that's all written down in that same red journal. And it's given the name the Red Book of Westmarch. So it's not a physical book in the external world. It's within the imaginal world of Middle-earth. But it is interesting that Tolkien decided to call it the Red Book, or the Red Book of Westmarch. And the reason he's doing that is there's some mystery to it, but part of why he's doing it is to situate his story in a medieval book tradition where oral histories, or I should say legends and myths and fairy stories and folklore, they were written down after being told for generations. They were written down in these medieval manuscripts, and those manuscripts were named after the color of their cover and usually the place where it was housed. And so Tolkien is following that medieval book tradition by calling his book by the name of the color of the cover and the place where it was housed. And if you read closely the front matter to The Lord of the Rings, like the prologue and so on, you realize that Tolkien is actually positioning himself not as the author of this story, but as the translator. Now, this, obviously he is the author of this story. He spent 12 years writing The Lord of the Rings and so forth. But to position himself as the translator, he's wanting to present what's within the covers of this book as a history. And something that Tolkien said is, Middle-earth is our Earth. I think this connects to a question you were asking earlier, too. Middle-earth is our Earth, but the time is imaginary. And so that's a really kind of important thing, that Middle-earth isn't some other planet. It is this Earth. It's the place that we all call home, but the time is imaginary. And so that's where you get this intersection between an imaginal realm or an imaginal time, but the physical reality of this Earth. I think that's actually why Tolkien's story is such an extraordinary ecological tale. a lot of people will say, well, there is no main character of The Lord of the Rings, unless maybe Middle-earth itself is the main character.
Huh. That's interesting. I never thought about that. Yeah, because there really isn't, right? But I have, I've looked at some of the symbols like the rings, right?
Yeah.
All the different rings. Oh, man, it really feels close to some occult stuff that I've read, right? So there were, I forget how many rings of power, right? What in there? Nine rings of power, right?
It adds up to 19 because you have you have 3 for the elves, 7 for the dwarves, 9 for mortal men,
right,
and then the 1 for the Dark Lord.
Gotcha. See, and here's another trippy thing too. In just basic gematria, this is what I've found, and there may be nothing there, but that number 9 is the number of a man, right? Like if you look at basic gematria, 243, 144, 666, it's all just adding the numbers up to the simplest form. So if you get 18, you keep adding until you get down to the simplest form. All those numbers keep coming back to 9, right? 9 being the number of man, and I'm thinking, okay, so even in Tolkien's story, he said there were 9 rings to rule over man.
A man, yeah.
And it's like, all right, so is somebody know something that I don't, right? Or is there really some kind of power behind all of this that is just kind of coming through us and we have no idea? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think with Tolkien, he created a world so vast. It's not just what's in The Lord of the Rings. It's not just what's in the Silmarillion, which some people will go on and read, which tells the story of the creation of the world and the first age and the second age. But he was working on these myths and legends for decades. He basically worked on these stories from 1914, which is when he wrote the first poem of Middle-earth, until he died in 1973. So that's a lifelong devotion to writing the stories of one world. And
wow,
the attention to detail he would bring, the languages that he was inventing. He was a master philologist, which technically translates as a lover of language, but someone who's a linguist. He studied language, and he spoke 19 languages of this world. And then he went on to invent another 14 languages, and he was always reworking them. And the level of attention and detail that he brought into writing these stories, it gripped him in a way that seems far beyond what we would call, simply making up a fiction. Mm-hmm. And when you look at not just The Lord of the Rings, but so much of what he wrote, I mean, the man wrote a creation myth. It's called the Ainu Vindale, the music of the Ainur. And whether it's his creation myth or the sacred numbers in, the ring poem, like we were just talking about, or so many different parts of the story. The 9 members of the fellowship, for example. These sacred numbers, 3, 7, 9, 1. It's as though he is tapping into some kind of mythological source or archetypal source. And there's all these parallels in his creation myth to the primordial tradition and to Gnosticism, to Kabbalah, to so many of these wisdom traditions and mystery schools. And Tolkien was a learned man, absolutely. He was very well educated. But sometimes I wonder, did he really know consciously all of what was coming through him?
Couldn't have been.
It's a mystery
to me, it seems impossible.
Yeah.
It seems like it seems impossible. Because, I don't know. Maybe there's just people's minds that I can't relate to, but to be able to do that, it had to have just kind of like spilled out, almost like vomit to me over and over again, because there's just too much there. I hate to use something that gross like that, but there's just so much there that I don't think a human mind could do something like what he did without it just passing through already. And maybe he found a way where he could actually become a channel or something. And I don't know. I feel like that's what he did. He found a way to just open himself up to this world that would come through him. But why? That's why I want it. That's the biggest thing to me. Why? And I've seen this too, like in other stories, not just Tolkien. I mean, but Tolkien is one of the biggest ones. But even in movies, like everybody loves The Fifth Element, that movie, right? This thing speaks to everybody because of the symbolism in it, I think. And when I study, like, occultism or Rudolf Steiner or any of this stuff, I really think something is like programming the program. I know that sounds complex, but I feel like we're living in some type of organic program, and there's something out there in the cosmos or something that's unseen that is sending messages via symbols, stories, imagination, that's constantly trying to prod us to move things along. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know what you mean. I mean, whether it's coming through stories or art or dreams or, something like astrology, which, how do we explain how something like astrology works?
Right.
It seems that the cosmos itself is intelligent, aware, caring even, and that we as human beings living on this earth, that we are a moving center of meaning in this cosmos, and that there's some kind of special attention being paid in some way. It's an extraordinary sacred mystery in many ways.
Yeah.
Tolkien had a term that he used, and maybe this will take a little bit of unpacking, so can give it the appropriate amount of time if it seems interesting. But he used this term subcreation. And by subcreation, he's speaking about that experience of the imagination, the image arising in the imagination, and then shaping it through one's creative artistic capacities. So subcreation is like a two-step process. It's the image arising in the imagination and then shaping it into art to make what Tolkien called fantasy. And the reason he called it subcreation was Tolkien was a Roman Catholic. He was a devout Catholic, and he saw this kind of creative form as creating under God. That's why it was subcreation. So sub meaning under. So creating under God. And he essentially saw what he was doing as being a channel for God's divine creative power or imagination. And so that it's actually God's imagination coming through him. Now he's shaping it. He's choosing the right words to give it form. He's the one revising it and so forth. That's the second step, the art. But the first step, the imagination, he saw as coming directly from God. And so for Tolkien at least, there was a moral dimension to creating in this way. And he actually saw fantasy, as he described it, bringing about a story within a secondary world as adding to the efflorescence of creation itself, of the divine creation, that we as human beings are actually gifted by, in his mind, by God or the divine to be able to create. And he said this wonderful thing. It's one of those quotes I've committed to memory because I find it so moving. He says that fantasy is and remains a human right because we are made. and we are made in the image and likeness of a maker. So from Tolkien's perspective, his Christian perspective, he saw our creative capacity coming from the fact that we're made in the image of God. And I find that to be such a profound reclamation of our creative capacity.
Yeah, it does. It feels like, Tobias Lawrence told me that one time. He said, we are little mini creator gods, but we're not as small as we think we are, especially when we use our imagination. That's funny that you say that. Yeah. We're at the top of the hour. Look, if you guys got any questions, you can ask in the Fringe FM chat. Of course, the phone lines are always open if you want to call in to BeccaTarnas.com. That's the website for reference. We'll be right back. More Lighting the Void coming up.
This is Crow 777, and you are listening to The Fringe FM.
I'm Ryan Gable, and I want to remind you to keep your radio, phone, tablet, or computer tuned to The Fringe FM, and visit the website thefringe.fm to listen to the entire lineup of shows. You can also catch my broadcast, The Secret Teachings, Monday through Friday, beginning at 12 a.m. midnight U.S. Pacific Time, right here on The Fringe FM.
Alex X. Hi, I'm Alex Exum, and you're listening to The Fringe FM.
What's up, Joe? Hey, man, I just wanted to say your show, dude, keeps getting better and better and better. I love Lighting the Void and The Fringe FM.
OMG! People are jumping on board to the Life Change Tea Regiment. Brew, steep, and drink for a gentle, taste great cleanse. It's changing how they feel. See what everybody's talking about. Log on to getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. Life Change Tea aids in digestive slowdown and helps people get moving down a healthy path. We won't make claims. We'll just let you decide. Experience is much better than a commercial anyway. If you want results, log on to getthetea.com and purchase your super strength cleansing tea. You won't be disappointed. And if you're looking for some mind-body suggestions, go to YouTube and punch in the search bar Health Matters Now. That's Health Matters Now. Put power into your health now. So, getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com for super strength tea. And YouTube, Health Matters Now. That's Health Matters Now for valuable suggestions. Getthetea.com. The tea that makes you go.
This is Reverend John M. Polk. Please visit me at johnpolkmedia.com and visit my show, Quantum Hologram Matrix, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, every Tuesday on thefringe.fm.
Hey, Fringe FM listeners, did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or no Wi-Fi available, you can still listen to every minute of the Fringe FM by calling 701-719-3971. No smartphone app or internet needed. Saves your data plan and no extra cost if you have unlimited minutes. Call 701-719-3971. That's 701-719-3971. Listen to the Fringe FM on any phone, anytime, anywhere.
Listen, I want to tell you about G.I. Joy from GetTheTea.com. It's the best alchemical concoction of goodies for your stomach and digestive system I can recommend, and that's all based on my experience. Packed with colostrum, acidophilus, aloe, peppermint, and turmeric. If you do your own research, then you know this is the bee's knees for the stomach and digestion. Now, due to Big Brother's ears and the eye in the sky, you know I can't go into the details about what it helped me with. All I can say is I got relief. It's non-GMO, no fillers, no preservatives, manufactured right here in the US of A, and delivered to you by the only people who stay on top of the game and are out in front. Go grab a bottle of G.I. Joy at GetTheTea.com and see what all the fuss is about.
Again, that's getthetea.com.
Hey, is that a new music app?
Yeah, check it out. Surfer Music Discovery. It links to thousands of online stations, but the twist is you see the song names and artists that are now playing live.
That's different. No guessing. Looks like a waterfall of music.
So many formats. Rock, oldies, country, R&B, jazz, and a whole lot more.
How's that spelled?
Surfer. S-U-R-F-R.
Is it expensive?
It's free. No need to sign up or sign in.
Get the Surfer Music app free from Google Play or the App Store.
Hola, Fringe listeners. This is Dave Cruz of Beyond the Strange, and you're listening to The Fringe FM.
To Lighting the Void. The call-in number is 1-800-588-0335. If you would like to text, you can text in at 501-777-5631.
You can also email the show to at contact@lightingthevoid.com. If you're just tuning in, I'm Joe Roop. This is Lighting the Void. We're here with Becca Tarnas tonight, and fascinating stuff that we've been discussing. The Red Books of Carl Jung and J.R.R. Tolkien. And I'm looking at some of your writings here, Becca, and you've published some pretty cool stuff, like, the synchronicities between the two books. That's pretty interesting. Mm-hmm. I'd really like to get into that, and I'd kind of like to ask you about that, too. What are some of the biggest synchronicities right off the bat that you started noticing between both Carl Jung and Tolkien?
Well, one of the major ones that first stood out for me was just one of timing. And I already touched on this earlier, but Carl Jung's Red Book period, when he first started having these visionary experiences, began in 1913. And so he started recording these experiences and then eventually illustrating them. And right around that same time, a young J.R.R. Tolkien began this series of drawings that he stored in a sketchbook that he called the Book of Ishness. Ishness spelled I-S-H-N-E-S-S, the Book of Ishness. And there's no explanation in this book. They're simply extraordinary drawings. And they are symbolic. They're clearly emerging directly from the primal imagination. And he was making these drawings for a number of years before he started writing the stories of Middle-earth. In some ways, they were like this imaginative prelude to the first stories of Middle-earth that he began writing in. Really, 1916 is about when that started. So Jung and Tolkien were having these kind of primary creative periods beginning right around the same time, 1913, before the First World War broke out, which they were each tremendously affected by. Jung recognized that his visions had been essentially processing the war. They were precognitive. And Tolkien fought in that war and was extraordinarily shaped by it. All but one of his friends was killed in the war. And so Jung and Tolkien were kind of working in tandem at these times. This is long before Tolkien starts writing The Lord of the Rings, but it's the beginning of the mythology of Middle-earth. And one of the very interesting parallels is that in 1916, Carl Jung wrote the 7 Sermons to the Dead. And this is maybe the most famous part of the Red Book because it was actually published not long after he wrote it, whereas the rest of the Red Book wasn't published until 2009. So just actually this month, October, marks the 10-year anniversary of the publication of Jung's Red Book. So, almost a century after it was created. And so in 1916, Jung wrote the 7 Sermons to the Dead, which is essentially a cosmology, wow, my words are getting all mixed up. It's a creation myth, a cosmogony, that's the word I was going for. And just 3 years later, 1919, Tolkien writes his own creation myth, and he calls it the Music of the Ainur. He later renamed it the Ainulindale, which is just the Elvish form for Music of the Ainur. And there are so many parallels between these two creation myths. It's just extraordinary, beginning with an undifferentiated unity, and then a differentiation, a split between light and darkness, then the creation of the many gods. And there are, of course, significant differences, too, between the creation myths, but it's just amazing how many are similar. And so that's just one parallel between Tolkien's Red Book and Jung's Red Book, and the fact that they both wrote these creation myths 3 years apart. Another one that's a really kind of beautiful, simple example is that in Jung's Red Book, as he was going into these fantasies, he's encountering all kinds of figures. And the most important one that he met is an old magician named Philemon, who ended up becoming kind of a guide to him. And he's not only described in the Red Book, Jung went on to describe him in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, which is essentially his edited autobiography. So Philemon is a fairly well-known figure in the Jungian world. So he's this imaginal figure that Jung encountered in his Red Book period. And he's this old man with these kind of alive eyes. He's a magician, and he gives guidance and wisdom. And that might sound kind of familiar for readers of Tolkien. Doesn't that sound like Gandalf the Grey, who's a wizard, who has these, sparkling alive eyes, and he also acts as a guide and brings wisdom. So there are these two parallel figures, and we could say, okay, they're both expressions of the archetype of the wise old man, and that's absolutely true. But it's just extraordinary, the similarities between the two of them. They're not just simply wise old men, but they even look similar in the descriptions that Jung and Tolkien expressed of them. They have very similar personalities. The first meeting of them in the Red Book and in The Hobbit, as it were, are remarkably parallel. They both take place in a garden. The person meeting them is really flustered, ends the meeting very quickly. So that's another one of the examples of a parallel between Philemon and Gandalf. I could go on. I wrote my whole dissertation on this.
But you you wrote a book about all this, though, right? That relates the two?
I did.
Okay.
I did. So I wrote my PhD dissertation on this, which is essentially a book. And at this point, it can only be accessed by university libraries, so that's challenging. Okay. I have a lot of talks out there on it, showing, parallel images and so forth. But it is one of my goals within this next year to bring the dissertation out as a book so that it can be more widely shared.
So if you could give advice to somebody that says, look, I want to learn how to use my imagination to make my life better. Right? What would you say to that person?
I would say a few things. And on the one hand, I would say feed your imagination, nourish it, read great literature, read great stories, enjoy the art that you're drawn toward, the visual art, the great films, the wonderful music. Feed your imagination with what other imaginations have created. So that's the first thing I would say. And then I would also recommend some kind of a practice with the imagination. And I'm going to directly recommend what Carl Jung did, and he called it active imagination. Now, this isn't something that he invented. It actually has a very long lineage through the alchemical traditions and Neoplatonism and the Gnostics and so forth. So a lot of people throughout history have engaged with this practice. But Jung brought it into modernity, and he brought it into psychology. And essentially what active imagination is, it's like meditating, but it's like meditating with images. So instead of focusing to empty your mind, instead you focus on an image. Or it doesn't even need to be, it can be an image. Let's say you choose an image from a dream or some spontaneously emerging image. Or maybe it's just starting with an emotion. Let's say you're feeling really melancholic one day. And so you sit down with this intention of the practice of active imagination, and you sit with your melancholy. And then you can ask yourself, does it have a color? What do I see here? And what one does with active imagination, whether focusing on an emotion or an image, is you hold that image in your conscious awareness until it begins to shift. And this is the moment of trust, where you have to trust that something will happen. But I encourage people to try it, to take an image that you can draw from, whether it's a work of art or a tarot card, or what I would recommend more is one of your own images, like something that arose in a dream, and just with your eyes closed, stay with that image and then see how it changes. And if you stay with how it changes, if what you are observing shifts, there may be a point in that conscious engagement where you can, as Jung said, step into the drama itself and enter in. And
wow, that's really cool.
This is basically, it's basically like inducing a visionary experience, but it takes a lot of work, and it takes practice and it takes trust, because you have to suspend the critical faculty, that part of you that is, and this happens when you meditate in a more traditional sense too, without images, the emptying of the mind. That little critical voice comes in and says, why are you doing this? What's the point of this? This isn't real. And all those little things. And we have to be able to suspend that critical voice for a little bit and then see what else comes up. And, it's one thing to talk about it, but when you work with it and you experience it, I think we can tell the difference between when we're making something up or forcing something to happen and when something is actually really naturally arising in the imagination. And
wow, this is really cool. Yeah. I'm sorry, but have you looked into the art of scrying at all? Like the real, because when you speak of that, it makes me think about that. How the East used to use Tattwa cards. I don't know if you're familiar with Tattwa cards, but they would use.
I'm not.
Yeah, so there's Tattwa cards that have symbols that represent elements, like the egg, represents earth, and it's a black egg. And then you have triangles, like certain colors that represent fire or water or whatever. But what you would end up doing is staring at these symbols almost to the point where the colors would flash. And then, I don't know exactly how they do it, but when you said trust it, there's some kind of trigger there where they trust and they let go, right? And then they kind of move through this symbol like a doorway. And then the visions that they have afterwards they write down. Like, they trust the visions. They trust everything. And then certain magicians could even, when they would run into characters and stuff, they would use certain symbols or whatever to test the entities and test their nature and stuff. And it's just it's not dreaming, but it is kind of like active imagination, like you're talking about.
It sounds very much like it. There's a lot, it sounds like, is in common. It seems in many ways, I'm describing Jung's experience of it, but like, he stumbled across it by accident. And yet there are so many traditions that have codified rules and ways of engaging with this exact same thing. So, that's wonderful to hear about scrying.
Yeah, because when I read a little bit about it, I was like, okay, this is not dreaming. This is not just imagination. It's not the out-of-body experience. This is taking a symbol or a card, a tarot card or a symbol. The Tattwa cards work really well for some reason, and using it as kind of like a doorway into that realm, so to speak. So you're not unconscious, you're not asleep, but it's a whole different thing. It's I believe it's something that takes time and skill to master, right? And what you're talking about, this active imagination and trusting it, I think sounds to me pretty close to it. Now, have you done this yourself? Have you been able to do this successfully?
Yeah, I think that part of why I've been drawn down the path that I have in terms of what I've studied is that this is something that I was already doing. I didn't, sit down and think, I'm doing active imagination, but I was the kind of, first of all, child and then teenager, and then it never went away, that could be completely immersed in my imagination. And it would sometimes feel like the external world was overlaid by images from my imagination.
Oh my God, really? That's, I did hear you right, what you just said, right? The external world was overlaid by your imagination, like it was. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, it was, like I would look out at the external world and I would see what I would see.
Yeah.
And actually, this was intimately connected to my relationship to Tolkien stories. So I had The Hobbit read to me for the first time when I was 9 years old, and found it, something about it felt so familiar. This feeling of I've been here before. The names felt familiar, the descriptions of the landscapes. I had this feeling of belonging. And so then a few years later, when I read The Lord of the Rings, it was even more profound and powerful, and it just completely saturated my lived experience. And so I would really kind of feel like I was living, half in my normal life as a teenager and half in this other world of Middle Earth. And I couldn't really explain it all that well to people other than, I really like this story and I'm not really, and, I had no language to understand all of this. And yet it was just absolutely immersive. And so what I'm saying that the outer world was kind of overlaid by my imagination.
Right.
I would look out and see, of course I could still see physically what was there, but it was also imbued with these inner images. And so it was like I was seeing an inner world and an outer world simultaneously. And I found throughout my teens that I couldn't really relate this too much to other people. I didn't have much language for it, and I reached a point where I just figured this was all something that I needed to set aside, the usual sense that we have in this culture that fairy tales and folklore and so on are childish things that we have to move beyond. And then, thank goodness, when I was in graduate school, my one of my wonderful professors, Jacob Sherman, assigned Tolkien's essay on fairy stories, and suddenly a whole horizon of possibilities opened up for me, and I realized that I could actually study this as an adult, and I could try and understand what I felt like had happened. Why did this inner world feel so real to me, even when I didn't really have much affirmation that it was? So it wasn't necessarily active imagination per se at that stage, but I was certainly experiencing kind of going into an imaginal world in that way. And so when I then came across the parallels between Jung's Red Book and Tolkien's, and that opened up the question of, well, what is the imagination, and is the imaginal realm a real place, and so forth. There was obviously a very personal drive behind that, and I find active imagination to be an extraordinary practice. It definitely takes discipline compared to, say, working with sacred medicine or holotropic breath work. That can be even more immersive than active imagination is. But having, as you mentioned at the beginning of the program, I teach in the Jungian Psychology and Archetypal Studies program at Pacifica Graduate Institute in Santa Barbara. And part of the course I teach is leading students through an experience of active imagination. And I am blown away every time by the experiences these students have, or I do this in workshops too, the experiences that the workshop participants have, and then how they record it, the art that they create in response, the stories that they write down of what they've experienced, and how it opens up something absolutely extraordinary in their lives, recognizing that this is something that we all have access to. The imagination is our birthright as human beings, I feel.
I totally agree with you on that. 100%. Powerful stuff, actually, more than we know. We'll be right back with Becca Tarnas. Don't forget, too, that you guys, tomorrow night we're going to do the open lines. Alex Exum will be here, and hopefully we'll have a surprise guest. We got a little bit more to go here on the show. Stay with us.
Thanks for listening to this broadcast. Need another late night fix? You can tune in every weeknight to Lighting the Void with Joe Roop on The Fringe FM.
Hi, this is David Oman with HouseAtTheEndOfTheDrive.com. You're listening to KTLK, The Fringe FM.
I like to listen to Lighting the Void because of the guests, the content, and the host, Joe Roop. He's smart, he's intelligent, and he seems to ask the questions that we all have on our mind. We're all searching for the truth, and Joe helps us get closer to it. I love this show. I love this show. I love this show. Lighting the Void.
Hi, this is Aaron Hunter, host of Real Paranormal Activity, the podcast where we tell real paranormal experiences of people from around the world. And we also conduct interviews with authors, investigators, psychics, and mediums. Real people, real stories, real fear. Thursdays at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern on The Fringe FM. See you then.
Hey, this check is wrong. I worked a holiday and 7 hours of overtime. Not getting paid correctly is a real pain. It could also hurt our boss if our company provides out-of-compliance checks. That's right, construction companies doing business with the government can get fined, or officials of the companies can go to jail if the checks aren't right. It's a law. The Davis-Bacon Act has 30 compliance issues for every check, but there is an easy way for construction companies to be in compliance. EMARS offers Compliant Client, a web-based system that finds and corrects all 30 of the possible out-of-compliance check issues. Users of Compliant Client report an 80% savings in time and money. Running a weekly payroll usually takes about 5 minutes. All 15,000 plus clients of EMARS have never had a legal compliance issue. Plus, they sleep better on check day. Contact EMARS at emarsinc.com or call 480-595-0466.
The Fringe FM isn't just a radio station. We also provide services for all your audio production needs. If you are interested in live radio or pre-recorded podcasts, we're here to help. We even do audio enhancements and voiceovers if needed. If you want to do a podcast or live radio show and even want the option to syndicate on terrestrial radio, from simple audio file enhancement to live production and call screening, we have you covered. We have worked with some of the best professionals in the business in order to provide coaching instruction for content creation, show structure, and more. Contact The Fringe Digital Media for more at info@thefringe.fm. That's info@thefringe.fm. Or call 501-777-5631 for a consultation.
Do you want to know the truth? Are UFOs real? Are aliens visiting Earth? Are governments around the world hiding the biggest secret in history? We're UFO Seekers, official partner of The Fringe FM, and we're on a hunt for the truth. Join us as we investigate locations like Area 51 by subscribing on YouTube at youtube.com/UFO Seekers.
Hey, Fringe FM listeners. Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or no Wi-Fi available, you can still listen to every minute of the Fringe FM by calling 701-719-3971. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. Saves your data plan and no extra cost if you have unlimited minutes. Call 701-719-3971. That's 701-719-3971. Listen to the Fringe FM on any phone, anytime, anywhere.
Hello, this is Vance Nesbitt. Take the time to expand your mind by listening to Lighting the Void with Joe Roop right here on the Fringe FM.
Alex
X. Hi, I'm Alex Exum, and you're listening to The Fringe FM.
I'm super stoked about this conversation. I can't wait to take it on through the night. But right now, our guest, Becca Tarnas, is with us, and the website is www.beccatarnas.com. I don't know if you need the W's or not. You could probably just put in Becca with 2 C's, Tarnas, Tarnas.com. And I'm looking through your website here, Becca, and I've noticed, too, that you also work with astrology, which I kind of have been working with myself a little bit here lately, and I'm wondering how all this relates to what you do, because I'm just curious about you. I got to say that I'm just curious about you, your work, what you're doing. So when this show is over tonight, I'm definitely going to go back and do some YouTube binging and look into what you're doing, because this is some really cool stuff. But you decided to get into astrology. Is there something that's going on here that I'm not seeing that relates with Jung and Tolkien and astrology? There's got to be. What's the gem here?
Well, there is, particularly with Jung, and this is something that's coming out more and more just in the last couple of years, that Jung was learning astrology as early as 1911. And it actually deeply informed his work. It informed how he made sense of the experiences he had in the Red Book, and it informed the development of his psychology. And there was a book published just last year, actually, edited by Kieran LaGrice and Safwan Rossi, and it's called Jung on Astrology, and it's actually all of Jung's own writings on astrology, all published in one volume, so you can see them all together. And it's something actually that a lot of Jungian psychologists don't know a lot about, or occasionally are actively in denial about. But Jung was deeply influenced by and involved in working with astrology. By the end of his career, he was using astrology with all his patients. So there's definitely a direct connection there. And also astrology and Jungian psychology have in common archetypes. So in depth psychology, there's an understanding of the archetypes of the psyche, or the archetypes of the collective unconscious, and that in some ways we're being lived by these archetypal powers. And in astrology, particularly the branch of astrology that I work in, which is called archetypal astrology, there's a recognition that the meanings that are associated with each of the planets are archetypes in themselves. So when we think of something like Mercury, it represents or symbolizes the mind, the intellect, thinking, learning, reading, writing, education, institutions of education, speaking, storytelling, so on. So I'm using all these different words to describe what is a symbol. And that is another way of understanding that is it's an archetype. An archetype is what unifies all of those kind of metaphors for each other. You can kind of tell when I'm describing that astrological archetype of Mercury that all of those qualities are associated. They're all connected to the mind and the mental and the intellectual and, forms of communication, the logos. Mercury is the messenger of the gods. So that's just one particular planetary archetype, but all the planets have different archetypes or qualities or characteristics associated with them. And that's something that depth psychology and astrology share in that way. So that's certainly part of my interest. And then also, while my deep love of Tolkien was born in childhood, and there's probably some karmic reason for it because it's so consumed my life, my interest in astrology actually came through my family. So I'm a second-generation astrologer. My father's an astrologer, and of course I never thought I would be an astrologer for that very reason. But about a decade ago, I started taking some interest in it and studying it, and very quickly picked it up, and learned a lot from a variety of people, including my father. And now I find myself a decade later as this being a major part of my professional life because it's something that I'm deeply passionate about. I absolutely love, and it also really shapes my worldview and my understanding of our human situation in this cosmos. So that's my kind of broad and interconnected answer.
Well, thank you. And right now I feel like that we're going through, I can tell you what I'm going through right now is some major karma stuff. Like I feel like right now, and I told you this during the break, and I don't think I'm the only one, that there's some stuff that your soul has to work out, and eventually I think you get time in your life to work it out. And then at some point the transits in your chart are like, they get to where they're like, okay, well, you know what? You're going to work this out now, and you can try to dodge it any way you want, but you're going to work this out. And you don't really realize that. These things you don't realize actually until you look into astrology, I think. And you go, oh, okay, well, this is starting to make sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Astrology gives us language to describe what we already know about ourselves or what we're already experiencing. I'll sometimes meet with clients where they're really nervous that I'm going to tell them something about themselves that they don't want to hear, that's going to surprise them. And every time, one of the most satisfying things to hear is when they say, yeah, that's me, that sounds like me. It's like, well, of course it's you. The more you know yourself, the less your astrological chart is going to surprise you. But what it is going to give you is language to better understand who you are. Oh, that's the part of me that is impatient or gets angry. Oh, that's the part of me that falls in love in a completely, fairy tale, head over heels, enchanted kind of way. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's the part of me that's, that gets writer's block and that needs to be overly organized or something like that. And we can give these astrological labels to it. So, yeah, with what you brought up of feeling the sense of karma right now, we are living through an extraordinary time in terms of the world transits. So if I can just go into that for a moment.
Sure.
There's an alignment of two planets, Saturn and Pluto. They're in what's called a conjunction, where if you look up in the sky where they are, it looks like they're right next to each other. And the archetype associated with Saturn has to do with limits, with constraint, constriction, contraction. It's boundaries, it's discipline, it's division, it's negation. Every time you hear someone say no or not or never, those are Saturn words. They're negating words. Saturn is the blocks and challenges and obstacles we face, the suffering we experience. It has to do with mortality, with death, with the endings of things, but also with maturity and wisdom. And then Saturn is in alignment with Pluto. And the archetype of Pluto it's the depths, it's the underworld, it's the survival instinct. It's very primal, very libidinal. It has to do with deep transformation, with the death rebirth mystery, like the phoenix dying into the fire and being reborn from the ashes. So it's destruction and creation. It's power dynamics, kind of the raw power drive, and it pushes things to extremes and intensities.
Yeah.
So what happens when those two energies come together? It's very much like a pressure cooker, like an intense container where there's often contraction and crisis and division and othering. And if we look through history, for example, if we just look through the last century or so of when Saturn and Pluto were in alignment with each other, it correlates with some of the most catalytic and catastrophic conflicts and geopolitical conflicts, wars, crises, and so forth that have happened. To carry with the theme of what we've been talking about with Jung and Tolkien, when they were in their Red Book periods right before the First World War, or leading through the war, I should say. Well, the First World War started under a Saturn-Pluto conjunction, just like we have now. The Second World War started under a Saturn-Pluto square. The Vietnam War started under a Saturn-Pluto opposition. 9/11 happened under a Saturn-Pluto opposition. And now we're in the conjunction of Saturn and Pluto, and we're seeing, certainly in this country and also all around the world, division, conflict, violence, othering, xenophobia, making the other out as enemy, and this profound sense of disconnection happening, that this feeling that we live in a dark time. And on the one hand, it can be kind of scary to think of it that way. You look through history, you see all these really intense correlations. You look at the world right now, and it can feel just kind of intimidating in some ways. But the thing that also tends to happen under Saturn-Pluto alignments is that it's a time to face the shadow. I mean that in a Jungian sense, of to face the shadow in the collective and to face the shadow within. And Saturn-Pluto alignments tend to call forward in us a moral response, an ethical response to the conflicts and challenges that we see in the world, this sense of a karmic reckoning, and being called forward to meet it. And that can take place on the collective level, but I think for most people that takes place just within our own inner lives, within our relationships, within our families, within our own individual psyche and our capacity to grow and transform and be in integrity in response to the needs of our time. So even in these most challenging times when we have astrological alignments like this, I take a certain amount of hope from it. First of all, just knowing that when you look at it with an astrological perspective, you know when the alignment's going to end. So that helps. The Saturn-Pluto alignment's going to end in 2021, so we've got 2 more years of it. But that this too shall pass, and while we are in the time, we can decide how best to respond to it. And maybe I'll just finish this thought with probably my favorite quote from Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings, and it's when Frodo says, and you have to remember this book was written by a man born with Saturn-Pluto, and also so much of it was written during the Second World War. And Tolkien was so shaped by the First World War, so really so much Saturn-Pluto influence here. And it's when Frodo says that he wished this hadn't happened in his time. He wished that the ring hadn't been found. He wished that this task wasn't laid upon him.
I remember
And Gandalf's response to him, he says, "So do all who come to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us." And I think if we can have one mantra for this time period right now, it's all we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us.
Yeah, it's almost like when he said that, I knew exactly how he felt. I think we've all felt that a time or two in our life. Like, I wish this, why the heck did this thing come into my life now? Or why did I get this? I've heard that so much from people too, like the famous FML, right? Like my life and everybody else, mine's terrible and mine's cursed and everybody else's isn't because of this, And it's like, well, that's your burden to bear. That's your goal. That's like your story, So what are you going to do with it? Yeah, you're right. Pretty cool stuff. And I think what I've learned from you tonight is that we can use our God-given creative abilities called imagination, which is the base of our creative and divine abilities to not just explore ourselves consciously, but also fix problems in our lives and on the earth, and even manifest things that we want, and even use it just to explore. Like, there's nothing wrong with that either. Not everything has to be super practical. I mean, just going on a journey is good enough sometimes too,
Absolutely. Yeah. I think we live in too much of a practical-oriented culture right now. Like, what about daydream? What about reverie? What about slipping away into doing nothing? And what does that bring forward?
Right. So tell me about, let's start with your books here. Was your first book, was it Journey to the Imaginal Realm? Was that your first actual book that you released?
That is my first actual book. It just came out last month on Hobbit Day, September 22nd, and Journey to the Imaginal Realm is a reader's guide to The Lord of the Rings, published by Revelor Press, and it's meant to be read alongside The Lord of the Rings. So if you're rereading it or maybe encountering it for the first time, this book can act as a guide with reflections and some scholarly insight and biographical information about Tolkien and things to pay attention to, translations of Elvish, and also just a variety of thoughts that I've been carrying in relation to this story, The Lord of the Rings, for the last 2 decades. So it's really meant as a companion book, unless you're, of course, deeply familiar with The Lord of the Rings, and then it can add a kind of another layer of experience on top of that story.
Very cool. And so a lot of your other writings, or like your writings or your papers or publications, you were talking earlier that we'd have to go into like a school to get to them. That's I wish I could say that though. That would make me feel really cool. Well, you have to go to this university to get to, my book. But no, there's something else here that I'm looking at. It's really cool. Like the Archai, Saturn and the Theoretical Foundations of an Emerging Discipline. Go ahead. Tell me about that.
Well, that is a book that I co-edited. It basically is a book, but it's technically a journal issue. So Archai is, we call it the Journal of Archetypal Cosmology, and it's an academic research journal that is focused on astrology. So it's a group of astrologers who are really looking to bring forward credible research on astrology to demonstrate that this works, because it's really, astrology is so maligned in the academic world. So that's really the purpose of this journal. And I was invited on as one of the editors back in 2015 and co-edited the 5th issue that came out in 2016. It's called Saturn and the Theoretical Foundations of an Emerging Discipline. And actually, I've been working really hard on bringing out the 7th issue, which I'm actually editing on my own. And it's going to be published just next week, October 27th. So this is a big project on my plate right now. And there's a wonderful group of authors who have contributed articles and book reviews, and a lot of it's focused on Jung and Jung's relationship to astrology, but there's a very wide range looking at different lineages of astrology. So that'll be coming out just next week.
Wow, fantastic. And you've got, I'm just taking a wild stab in the dark here, but you do have your own copy of the Red Book by Jung, don't you? I bet you do.
I definitely do. I have the large facsimile version of it, and then I also have a reader's edition, which is the one that's filled with all my notes on it. But my copies of the Red Book have probably seen more wear than most, flipping back and forth through the huge pages as I've been researching it and writing about it, and then going on to teach about it too.
I still don't have one. I want one so bad, but every time I go to shop for it, it's like, good God, they're so expensive, but it's worth it, man. Like, just to go through all that. And I don't know if you've taken or if you've even gazed at Gordon White's his course. He has courses on his website, but the one that he does about journeying, the whole entire course is structured around the teachings of Jung and the Red Book, and it is it's fascinating, right? So, I mean, did you take that course, or did you get involved with it at all, or look at that?
I wasn't involved with it. I definitely know about it. I've had the great privilege of being on Gordon's podcast, Rune Soup, a couple times, and He's been a huge support in terms of students in his classes coming to courses that I've been teaching as well. But I haven't taken any of his courses at this point, but you're certainly piquing my interest.
Oh, yeah, it's fascinating. It's kind of like where I learned about what I called the out-of-body experience, where I was watching myself sleep, and the dream state was all just different phases of the same realm, right? Yeah, so some pretty cool stuff. Listen, I don't want to keep you too much longer. I want to really thank you for coming on. This stuff it touches so many aspects of my soul, and I know my listener's soul, like our, I guess, metaphysical part of us, the geeky part of us, that I would say likes to read and use our imagination, and it's all coming together. I think it's really cool that there's somebody out there like you that's showing us that this isn't just, kids stuff. This isn't just imagination the way you think about it. There's something more real and something more valuable here that we're all missing. And I believe what your work is about is really tapping into that power that's been hidden from us our whole lives. So thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been so wonderful to be in conversation with you, and just to feel the passion that you bring to these subjects and the interests, and I can just imagine how that must ripple out through your listeners as well. And there's so much to be reclaimed here in terms of our capacity as human beings, as these imagining creatures and these dreaming creatures with these journeying and visionary abilities, and to be able to affirm that the experiences that we already have are real, rather than denying or cutting ourselves off from the fact that we're having these experiences. Absolutely. I think is such an important reclamation of the power that we all have as individuals and collectively.
Man, you're so spot on with that. Thanks again for coming on, and I know that I'll be following your work, and I'm pretty sure our listeners are going to be keeping up with you. And if you guys want to know half the spirit of the show, just follow Becca's work, Becca Tarnas, and that'll tell you probably at least half of what the show is all about. Thank you for coming on again. I really appreciate it.
Thank you as well.
All right, guys, we'll be right back. More Lighting the Void. Come on.
Joseph Roop is your host. Pull back the blinds and uncover the truth. This is Lighting the Void Radio.
You're listening to The Fringe FM.
Somewhere between abnormal and paranormal, there's a show called Into the Paranormal. I'm Jeremy Scott. Hear me live Saturdays at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 Eastern on the Fringe FM.
Hey, I'm J.M. DeBoard, and when I want to talk about dreams, I look up my man Joe Roop and his show, Lighting the Void.
The Fringe FM isn't just a radio station. We also provide services for all your audio production needs. If you are interested in live radio or pre-recorded podcasts, we're here to help. We even do audio enhancements and voiceovers if needed. If you want to do a podcast or live radio show and even want the option to syndicate on terrestrial radio, from simple audio file enhancement to live production and call screening, we have you covered. We have worked with some of the best professionals in the business in order to provide coaching instruction for content creation, show structure, and more. Contact The Fringe Digital Media for more at info@thefringe.fm. That's info@thefringe.fm, or call 501-777-5631 for a consultation.
OMG! People are jumping on board to the Life Change Tea Regiment. Brew, steep, and drink for a gentle, taste great cleanse. It's changing how they feel. See what everybody's talking about. Log on to getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. Life Change Tea aids in digestive slowdown and helps people get moving down a healthy path. We won't make claims. We'll just let you decide. Experience is much better than a commercial anyway. If you want results, log on to getthetea.com and purchase your super strength cleansing tea. You won't be disappointed. And if you're looking for some mind-body suggestions, go to YouTube and punch in the search bar Health Matters Now. That's Health Matters Now. Put power into your health now. So, getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com for super strength tea. And YouTube, Health Matters Now. That's Health Matters Now for valuable suggestions. Getthetea.com. The tea that makes you go.
Hi, this is Sammy. Join us in the Deep South as we're lighting the void with Joe Roop on the Fringe FM.
Right, me old Chinas. I know it's an ad break, but before you lot shoot off and make yourself a cup of Rosie Lee or whatever else it is you're going to sling down your Gregory Peck, you need to listen to me babble. If, like me, you found your way to Lighting the Void via a downloadable podcast, you might want to take a butcher's at the Fringe FM Wind and Kite. You won't Adam and Eve how many other shows there are or what they rabbit on about. Ancient history, conspiracy, the consciousness, the esoteric, the occult, metaphysics, parapolitical, ufology, technology and spirituality, to name but a few. They got featured hosts like Ryan Gable, Jeremy Scott, Alex Exum, Tim Doyle, Cortana and Gigi, Susanna Ross, the Reverend John Polk, Michael Deacon and J.D. Lewis. You might find yourself listening to the thoughts and theories of the author of The Fish you just finished reading. Or you could pick up the dog and bone, call in and tell everyone your own beliefs or experiences. So do me a favour, before you put on the Ansel or crack open a bottle of vino or roll a joint, go to the Fringe FM and see what you're missing.
Listen, I want to tell you about G.I. Joy from getthetea.com. It's the best alchemical concoction of goodies for your stomach and digestive system I can recommend, and that's all based on my experience. Packed with colostrum, acidophilus, aloe, peppermint, and turmeric. If you do your own research, then you know this is the bee's knees for the stomach and digestion. Now, due to Big Brother's ears and the eye in the sky, you know I can't go into the details about what it helped me with. All I can say is I got relief. It's non-GMO, no fillers, no preservatives, manufactured right here in the US of A, and delivered to you by the only people who stay on top of the game and are out in front. Go grab a bottle of G.I. Joy at getthetea.com and see what all the fuss is about. Again, that's getthetea.com.
Are you intrigued by paranormal talk radio? You'll love the new paranormal radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now. The Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
Man, that Bundy's a bad dude. I know you're listening, Bundy, the guitar player on this show. Like, this guy is one of Eric Markham's friends who goes by the name of Bundy, and he's a bad man with a guitar. I've been begging him to come out. I'm like, come out, dude. We'll support you. We'll get the audience to support you. We'll help you get a studio. We'll do it. But he's one of those remains in the shadows type guitar players. Dan Lopez is here with us in the last hour. Did you like the guest we had on tonight, Dan? What did you think about it?
I enjoyed it a lot. I mean, she was covering all kinds of bases. I was like, you know, she could do 3 hours, no problem, and still have tons of freaking stuff to share.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Active imagination. That's something that I've talked quite a bit about on the show, but not so much about like scrying. And I noticed that in the chat room you said something about Edgar Cayce, like when these things, like when she was talking about active imagination, that method of going. Go ahead.
Going in and not being skeptical skeptical about what you're about to experience, or what you're doing and anything. It's like you have to suspend the skepticism, you know what I mean, the critical thinking and all of that stuff, in order to allow your imagination to have its way. So, and then have faith and be positive about it and let it go. Because once you start getting, it's just like you were saying, once I started thinking about something, boom, I was right out of it. So it's the same thing with that when you're working on your active imagination. Mm-hmm. It's like this author, Shakti Gawain, I guess her name is, has a book out called Creative Visualization, and it's you said books. She got another book out aside from. She got a few books out, but it allows you to learn how to actually do that and put it into practice and everything like that. She gives you step-by-step exercises in order to try out for yourself, and I found them very helpful. I mean, I was always, active imagination anyway. I loved reading and getting into stories and stuff like that, and it was like I was sharing with you earlier. I was like, dude, this is not my strong point. I fought through reading Silmarillion, and right after that, she mentioned Silmarillion, which I thought was cool, and I was like, but I've forgotten like 99% of what I read.
There's so many synchronicities happening right now in my life, dude. I think it's happening for a lot of people. Becca's website and what she was talking about with the imagination and what she's actually going through just reminds me of something that I've went through with another person. And it's like, you know what? Here's one thing that I've talked about with a lot of people that I feel like, and I'm just going to keep reiterating this. I feel like each and every one of you have something extremely awesome to offer the world. And we self-sabotage ourselves in a lot of ways. And I don't want anybody that listens to the show to do that. Like if you've got a dream, chase it, man. Like use your imagination. I don't know which Jose it was, but one of them was writing a script. I mean, send that thing off, keep doing that stuff. And I think when we start to doubt ourselves, right? Like when we really start to doubt even that part of ourselves, that's when things get messed up, man. And then you got people like Tolkien or whatever, where he could just create worlds upon worlds and details upon details. And not only that, the archetypes and the characters and everything that really speaks to our soul. And then he creates all these different languages. Do you think he sat around and even had time to doubt what he was doing in his imagination? As much as he did, I don't think he had time to doubt it. I think he just went with it, like he just trusted it. You know what I mean? I think we need to do that more.
Yeah. And as much as you want to put it out there for others to judge, in order to put it to use, like a screenplay writer or something like that, you got to understand that some authors trying to do that with their books take several reiterations before they can get it published. Yeah. And that's just putting it before somebody who's judging your stuff straight up in order to put it out there to think that it's viable for them. It doesn't mean that it's good or bad. It just means that it's up to them, their judgment, and they're looking at it from a completely different point of view, which is not in the creative vein. They're looking at it from a financial vein.
Right.
So what you're doing is completely spot on. You got the juices going, you got them flowing. Just keep doing it. Just stay at it, man. It was like Anne Rice. She wrote 1,000 books before she got hers freaking published.
Yeah. And just because the first book or script or whatever it is that you're sending off doesn't get picked up, it doesn't mean your fourth or fifth one won't, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was like you and I were saying the other night with the law of averages. It's like, it takes 100 no's to get to a yes.
Exactly. And then once that happens, something cool happens. They start, oh, what else you got? Oh, well, I had this thing I wrote a long time ago that so-and-so didn't pick up. And then the next thing you know, it's a movie. That's what I was trying to talk about the other day with persistence, right? Like you could do this your whole life and all it takes is just one stinking time, and then you're done. You become that. Now you're a writer. Now you're a published writer because you're persistent. There was a good example is, what's his name that was on Game of Thrones, like Peter Dinklage.
The little guy.
Yeah, he tells this story about that where, he wanted to be an actor, and it wasn't until he decided in his mind that I'm going to do everything it takes, like I'm an actor, period, and he let everything go, and he refused to be used as like a dwarf. A lot of dwarf actors do, right? Where they get used as little people or the little guy or whatever, right? He said, I don't want to be right. He said, I don't want to be an extra. I refuse to do that. I want to play a real role and a real character, and that's what I'm going to be. And he stood his ground, and he got turned down left and right. He went through a lot of hell, man. He talked about the rats in his apartment and all kinds of stuff, but Game of Thrones was his kickoff, man. When he got picked up on, he did a play or something like that, and then got picked up on Game of Thrones, and that was it, man. That just launched him.
It's like they say, it takes many years to become an overnight success.
That's right. Yeah, persistence is key. I wanted to talk about this scrying deal a little bit more, because it's one thing that we can relate to that these magicians used when she was talking about active imagination. And this is from Israel Regardie, and I'll just read this part here. It says, having acquired the general rule, it is probable that the student will discover for himself particular methods more or less suited to his own particular temperament, but it may prove useful to some, for me, to write in some detail the mode of scrying and of astral projection, which I have proved likely to bring successful results, and which by reasons of its continual tests would tend to lessen the many chances of illusion. Before proceeding further, it may be well to refer to the Microcosm lecture in Volume 1, which I'm reading from the Golden Dawn book by Israel Regardie, the 6th edition, okay? The theory of scrying and astral projection. He says, the rules for scrying and astral projection being almost similar, the two subjects can be studied together, the one being taken as the complement of the other. You can commence the operation of scrying simply, that is to say, not projecting the astral beyond the sphere of sensation into the macrocosmos, but retaining it into perceiving some scene in the universe reflected in the symbol which you hold. This latter being to you as a mirror, which shall reflect to you some scenes not within your range of sight. So when you watch like these Disney films or whatever, and they say magic mirror or scrying mirror, there's a real operation that can happen there if you'll do what like Dan's talking about and what Becca was talking about. As soon as you feel yourself slipping, you have to trust it. You can't doubt it. You have to let yourself just go into the scene. And these guys, I mean, that's all they did. They laid out the planes and stuff. Like they even have actual maps of the different planes and the different realms and stuff. It's insane in here. And I think there's something to this, a lot more than what we've been told. And I think because people have been teaching us, especially from religion, that it is evil or it's demonic or whatever, that it's just keeping us from our own power. It's just kind of like keeping us from going inside ourselves, where actually we were told that the kingdom of heaven is. And so I think what he's talking about there, Dan, and maybe you can help me, is like astral projection is when you can actually feel the physical sensations of leaving, so to speak, where scrying is just a vision that you have. You're not really moving.
Scrying is vision. Yes, yeah. Scrying is vision. There are several ways of doing it. There's many ways of doing it. I don't know if there's I can't even remember the name of it now, but there's a practice where what they do is they put a mirror. They have a mirror up on the wall, and they lower the lights all the way down so you can barely see anything. And then you just look into the mirror and you stare at the mirror. Like if you want, put a very small light behind you so that you can see what the hell is going on. But have it so low that you can barely see anything, and then you stare into the mirror, and then it gets you into a state. It actually puts you into a state, and you can actually see things, which I thought was kind of cool. I can't remember the name of it. Somebody in the chat will probably come up with the name before I do.
That's what that's what the magicians do when they use the obsidian mirrors, right? They would flank the mirrors with candles and stuff, so you could see spirits and things like that. I know Poke Runyon talks about that, but
very low light.
The Tatwa cards is what got my attention, and I still don't have that book. I want to get that dang book, but it's so expensive. But
which one?
It's the Magical Tatwas, a complete system for self. It's for a complete system. Like this is using the Tatwas kind of like for a complete initiation system where you don't do anything else. And it's
how do you even spell that?
Tatwas is Tattwas. And the book is the author's John Mumford, right? And all you got to do is get a set of Tatwa cards. And what I've learned about these cards, and I've got a set, and it's really trippy, right? So you'll get into kind of like a focused meditative state. Now, in the Golden Dawn, you don't start messing with Tatwas right away. They want to teach you, they try to teach you how to focus on a point first. And I think the reason why they do that is so you can start learning how to use this vision. But when you focus on this point, you'll focus on this card, and let's just say it's the one that's just like the shape of the egg, right? And you'll focus on it, and what happens is the colors will start to flash. You know how when you stare at something long enough, it starts to the outlines of things kind of have a flashy look to it? If that makes any sense?
Yeah. Or you start looking at something long enough and you get the primary color interchange going on. You take it away and all of a sudden, like a black and white or a primary color picture, you take it away and you look at a black and white, and all of a sudden you still see the colors, or you see colors.
Yeah. So that's exactly right. So they use flashing colors, like for, I guess for the Akasha is black and white, and it's a black egg with a white background or a white egg with a black background, either one. And then they have the fire one, which is the Tejas, which is a red triangle. Sometimes it'll have a green background. And then Vayu, which is air, it'll have like a blue with an orange background. And then it'll have, I don't know what they all are. I can't pronounce them all right. But the point is, when you stare at the sumbitches, right, they start to flash. And then I read this thing kind of like when it starts flashing, you close your eyes. Now, this was something different for me. I never saw this before or heard about this. But when you close your eyes, you know how you can see that image is still there, right? Except the flashing colors made it switch. And then it talks about passing through it. And that's when it talks about like what you were saying, like as you pass through this doorway, do not question anything. Don't doubt anything. Just let go, right? Don't be skeptical. Just learn how to trust it and go through it. And then after you go through it, you'll start to have visions, and you need to trust whatever they are, right? Just whatever visions come. Doesn't matter what they are. And you'll see landscapes, colors, entities, you'll run all kinds of stuff. And then as the teachings get deeper into scrying, they start telling you, well, if you run into this entity, trace this Hebrew letter or trace the glyph of Saturn for this or whatever. And these entities will either let you know their intentions, if they're good or bad or what. And then you just, when you're done, you journal it and write it down. Now, I know that sounds insane, but these cats wouldn't be saying, do this if there wasn't something to it. If it didn't lead you to something, and that's just one system. Like, this isn't even magic. That's my whole point about having to do magic and stuff. You don't have to do magic. You could actually just use the Tatwa system and go and use this as a spiritual system your entire life if you wanted to, without ever doing a magic ritual, period. Pretty trippy, though.
Right on. Very. You were bringing up something that you were talking about. I think it was one of the Monroe tapes or whatever. It helped you get into that state, that hypnagogic state.
Yeah. Yeah, the hemisync tape.
Was it, Robert? Yeah, was it hemisync tape? Mm-hmm. I got to hear that.
Yeah, the hemisync ones.
That's where a lot of things happen, man, when you're in that state between sleep and wake. I don't know what it is. It's like, but that's like, it helps you. It would assist you in turning off all your skepticism because you can get into that because you're in that state already. So, but practicing that non-skeptical stuff in order to know that you're going in there with a purpose, that's when you start doing some work.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I was just thinking maybe we could stare at a Tatwa symbol and listen to that. That'd be trippy, huh? Just kind of pass through it. Why not? But I kind of stick to, like, I have a system that I stick to because I don't want to mess with things before it's time to. I've already learned my lesson with that, And I mean, not too long ago, earlier today, I got mad, kind of upset at a friend of mine because they come to me for advice about magic and stuff, and I'm like, don't come to me for advice if you're not going to listen to me. And then they jump ahead and start doing stuff like, sex magic and all this other stuff, and I'm like, what's wrong with you? Like, why are you coming to me about this kind of advice if you're already just going to do what you want to do anyways? Like, are you just coming to make sure that I don't get pissed off about it? Like, what are you doing? Because that I'm structured in a certain way. Like, even Stephen Skinner said, it's important you learn the basics before you get into all this stuff. And he's one of the world's renowned, like, don't care. This is what I do. I summon spirits, and even he tells you. Well, there's pretty important maturity levels, and this is how you build wisdom, by experience. It's not just that we're telling you to slow down. It's not that for the sake of I don't want you to get hurt, but it's a matter of developing a properly, like they say in guitar. There's perfect practice, there's practice, and then there's perfect practice. Mm-hmm. So this way you could practice until the cows come home, but it doesn't mean you're going to get any better at what you're doing because you're still doing the same thing in the same manner that you were doing it 20 years ago. But if you practice in a gradual sense that you're constantly progressing, well, then that's different. So now you're challenging yourself and you're developing on the foundation that you're building. So you build a solid foundation so this way you have something to fall back on. So that this way, if you start feeling like you're going in the wrong direction, because you don't have to lie to yourself and you don't have to be in denial about being in a space that that you have no right to be in. You know what I mean? Just be honest with yourself. So you'll know where you're going and it's not doing the right thing. So once you start seeing that, you already can tell yourself, okay, I don't have to go that way, and I know what's going to be produced if I continue in this path. So why don't I just take the suggestions and do what I'm supposed to do? So then when you start doing that, and then all of a sudden things start happening. They might happen in like overnight or whatever, but after a while, you will have no choice but to start seeing progressions. Yeah, in your growth and in your wisdom and in your experience. So this way, and then you can come up and then you can speak on it, and you can speak on it in a mature manner. And, this is what happened to me. Yeah, honestly, I don't know if I was going to be honest with you guys, I don't know that many real magicians, what I would define as a magician. Like, I consider Frederick Xavier a magician. I consider David Griffin a magician. I consider Nineveh Shadrach one, Frederick Ashan that was on here, Stephen Skinner, Gordon White. Like, these kind of people have been through the ringer enough to be where they're at, and they all went through some type of basic training. Joe. You know what I mean? There's a basic damn training to this that's important that you understand before you start poking your finger at stuff. Now, chaos magicians probably won't agree with me on that, but even the best chaos magicians I know did some sort of structure before they just did. Like,
yeah, exactly. But it's like you said before, it's a maturity level. It's a maturity level. You know, because you can get to a certain point, and just because you're a chaos magician and you want to just do things and you want to prove things, that's okay and well and fine. But even the people who have, you know, succeeded in facing their fears and gotten through the next level, you know what I mean? That's a maturity level in and of itself. You know, that's a magician right there. You know, because you're doing the same thing. You're just transmuting your fear.
This stuff. What I'm trying to say too, also, this stuff can mess with your psyche, like for real. It can disturb your life,
your ego, all of that stuff. Yeah, it'll break you.
Yeah, it can disturb your life. It can cause things to happen in your life. It can disturb the ones you love. It can do good things too. It's kind of like, would you hand a Tommy gun to a 6-year-old, right? No, you know, but
only if it's aimed at a certain person.
I was watching this video. I forget where it was, but these guys were playing with this monkey, and they handed them a monkey an M16. Have you seen that? It's hilarious. And I don't know how the monkey got the M16, but he got it and just grabbed it and started pulling the trigger and swinging that thing back and forth, man. You know. It started, and everybody scattered. It was funny, and
brilliant.
I feel that way. Like when people say, "I want to do magic," and let's jump into, like sex magic and all this other stuff. Let's do it. You know, I know what I'm doing. I'm like, oh Jesus Christ, you know, let's just do whatever we want to do. And it's the next thing you know, you get a message, be like, "Hey man, weird stuff's happening to me, and I don't know why."
I'm in the hospital.
Yeah, I'm in the
I can't even hold the phone. I'm in this one sleeve sweater.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, but you talked to me about this the other night because you know I'm worried sick about this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, dude, what did you tell me? You said, dude, don't. You're not responsible if they don't listen or if they do their own.
You're not. You know, people are going to do whatever they're going to do anyway. I mean, it's nice. Like what you can do, the only thing you can do really is just plant the seeds of, you know, caution. Okay. That's it. You know, the stuff is out there and they're going to find the stuff if that's what they're doing because they're on a path that's seeking. So if they're seeking, then, you know, the stuff, the more that they go, the more that they're going to become exposed to, and they're just going to run into it with or without you. So the only thing that we can do is just spread the seeds of caution. It's like, you know, it's not like we don't know that you're going to run into this stuff. We just like to keep you aware of that, you know. Not everything that's out there is golden. So be mindful of what you're in for. You know, it's like, you know, you get on a motorcycle and the first time you go, you don't run out into the middle of traffic. You know, you take that stuff off the side roads and start practicing there and, you know, take your falls and when you can, you know, in a nice, safe environment as opposed to having your first fall in the middle of a freaking 3-lane highway.
That so reminds me when I first started getting on my bike. Yeah, man, for some reason, people are not able to. I'm going to figure out what's going on here because I just got another message that says that they're trying to donate to to Brian Conlon, the thing that we were trying to do for the listener, and they can't. It won't take it. I don't know. That's weird. I'm sorry, guys. I don't know what's going on there. I'll find out though. I got an idea, and I wanted to see what you thought about this. Were you around that night on the 13th, Friday the 13th, when we did the movie? Do you remember anything about that? And we used that cast thing, right?
Yes.
What I'm thinking about doing, and this is just a thought, but what I'm thinking about doing is like seeing if I could do that while I do the show, like cast, because some people, I guess, just want to see my head, you know, for some reason, like a bobblehead. I'm going to start putting out bobblehead Joe Roops or something, you know. But I was thinking about doing that, but I don't know if we could handle it or not. And see, everybody would say, I don't know if that would work because everybody'd have to. Because everybody'd have to download Cast, you know.
One thing, yeah. So you can do it on.
Y'all let me know. I'm just tossing some ideas around, but We'll be right back. We just got a little bit more here, too. Also, I want to play you guys something that a listener sent me that makes me real proud here at Lighting the Void. Looks like some of you guys are actually making some really good progress on your journeys. More of that when we come back.
This is Corbin, son of the one and only Joe Root, and you're listening to The Fringe FM.
Did you know that qualified patients can access medical cannabis in all 50 states? Canasense is a medical cannabis collective that helps patients in all 50 states gain access to cannabis medication. Canasense does this with a streamlined process and strict compliance with the Compassionate Use Act of 1996, the Affordable Care Act, and the U.S. Constitution. It is important for each patient to understand the legalities involved, the costs, and the benefits of cannabis medication. Through truth, legalization, and education, the medical benefits of cannabis will supplant recreational perceptions, and the real vision for change will be realized. Let the people and their personal doctors take control of their medical cannabis decisions before the greed of big business takes over. The tipping point for change is today, and Canasense is ready to lead the charge and enable legal access for all qualified patients to medical cannabis through its proven system. For more information, go to thefringe.fm/care or click the banner on the website today.
I think by now we can get the information.
I love magic, and on Lighting the Void, each and every week, you will get to hear shows about magic, mysticism, and many other subjects that stretch your mind and imagination. So when I got my mind on the magic and the magic on my mind, I listened to Lighting the Void on the Fringe FM. It's magic.
May the gods look with favor upon you.
You're wondering what we're going to do to you, aren't you?
Okay, here we go. AncientLifeOil.com. AncientLifeOil.com. Now, this is for CBD. AncientLifeOil.com. Again, for CBD. Where do I get CBD? AncientLifeOil.com. It's pretty good stuff. Organic, non-GMO. We are the Ferrari of CBDs. AncientLifeOil.com. You know, they say when you mention a person's name 3 times when you first meet, that you're going to remember. So I'd say to you, nice to meet you, AncientLifeOil.com. It's AncientLifeOil.com, right? Nice to know that you help people. AncientLifeOil.com. Think about this. Occasional stress, occasional anxiety, occasional inflammation, occasional stiffness, and intruders that get you down. AncientLifeOil.com. Okay, so I'm going to give you a fact for the day. So Ancient Life Oil does not help you with business deals. Hold on a second. If you feel better, it could help you make a better decision. Okay, I'm wrong. Just remember to go to AncientLifeOil.com.
Right, me old Chinas. I know it's an ad break, but before you lot shoot off and make yourself a cup of Rosie Lee or whatever else it is you're going to sling down your Gregory Peck, you need to listen to me babble. If, like me, you found your way to Lighting the Void via a downloadable podcast, you might want to take a butcher's at the Fringe FM Wind and Kite. You won't Adam and Eve how many other shows there are or what they rabbit on about. Ancient history, conspiracy, the consciousness, the esoteric, the occult, metaphysics, parapolitical, ufology, technology and spirituality, to name but a few. They got featured hosts like Ryan Gable, Jeremy Scott, Alex Exum, Tim Doyle, Cortana and Gigi, Susanna Ross, the Reverend John Polk, Michael Deacon and J.D. Lewis. You might find yourself listening to the thoughts and theories of the author of the fish you just finished reading. Or you could pick up the dog and bone, call in and tell everyone your own beliefs or experiences. So do me a favour, before you put on the Ansel or crack open a bottle of vino or roll a joint, go to the Fringe FM and see what you're missing.
You're listening to Lighting the Void. The call-in number is 1-800-588-0335. If you would like to text, you can text in at 501-777-5631.
So some of you out there are making progress. That's cool. When I say progress, I'm talking specifically about your ability to explore consciousness. I like to hear this. Are you ready for this, Dan? So I am ready. I am playing, that clip I play by Jared, listener, that says, the show's getting better and better and better, right? Well, apparently him and some his buddies have been listening to the show, and they've been trying out some things, and well, I'll just play it, and hopefully you guys will hear this. Let me make sure I do this right, because this is off SpeakPipe. And by the way, you can do this too. All you got to do is simply go to lightingthevoid.com, go to the contact page. There's a orange SpeakPipe button there, and if you play it, you can leave anything, a recording. I'll make a promo out of it, whatever you want to say. But this kind of made me proud, and I'm really glad to hear this. Here we go. Let me see if I'm going to open this up. Whoa, sorry. I actually was recording one instead of playing it. But you guys know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about, SpeakPipe, right, Dan? It's a little orange button. You push, record.
Oh, get on with it. Get on with it.
Okay.
I think everybody knows what we're talking about.
I hope so. Here we go.
California. Hey man, thanks for putting me on the air with that little message. It sounds awesome. It's really fun to hear my voice, and like my wife trips out because we listen to your show so much, dude. So thanks, man. That's just super exciting. A lot of fun. But hey, I was going to tell you that, man, that show with Jason Quit is the shit, dude. That was a great show. And you got me so fired up about lucid dreaming and just OBE and all this stuff that I've just been reading a lot of material on it and just practicing with the hands thing and like saying, am I dreaming over and over all day long, and just kind of trying to figure out how this works. And I've been lucid twice this last week. I've gotten a couple other of my friends that are up here. They're on it too. And so they actually went lucid. One of them texted me today and he went lucid last night. And we just can't hold on to it because we get so excited. And so after like discussing it with everybody, we joke and laugh around because right when you get a grasp on your lucidity, it just goes away just from excitement. And so we're trying to just stay calm and just kind of learn from what we've learned from your shows and stuff. So anyways, dude, thank you very much. And great show as always. And all of us up here in Humboldt County that I know, my friends and everything, we love listening to you, man. And so keep up the good work, dude. You're doing a great job. Take care, buddy.
Thank you, Jared, for using the SpeakPipe on lightingthevoid.com. They went lucid for the first time, man. That's worth an applause to me. I can't wait. I hope I hear more of that stuff from you guys, Get lucid. Let's start traveling. Because what happens after that, it's like, that was supposed to be a crowd surge, but that kind of sounded scary. I got to work on my effects.
What's scary?
It scared the hell out of me. There's one from Allison from 2 months ago. What is this? Now I feel like an asshole. What is this?
Hi, I'm a recent listener of your show. I'm a longtime paranormal fan. Question is that I have, do any of your guests feel that some hauntings or paranormal activity is related to kind of that Native American shamanism aspect? It's a piece of people's souls that are trapped in an area, repeating the same action over and over and over again. I love listening to stuff like this, but I don't hear that aspect brought into it very much, and I'm very interested to see what some of the experts in the field think about it. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Hi, I'm a
when we talk about that the other night?
It was the other night, actually.
Last night, actually, wasn't it?
I wasn't listening last night.
No. Well,
sorry.
I don't know much about that, but thanks, Allison. I'm sorry it took me so long to respond. I just noticed that one come up. I was sitting here telling everybody, hey, use the SpeakPipe thing. Don't you know what that is? The orange button, use it. And I'm looking down like, oh, what is this? Foot and mouth. Sorry about that. But yeah, we'll look into that a little bit further. I think Craig Naring's coming on. We're going to have a couple other people talk about that. And last night we did get into a little bit about orbs, and apparently there's certain types of orbs come from that, but I think a lot of that's just speculation, So, yeah.
Oh.
What?
Don't know.
No. I mean, I don't think orbs are speculation. I just think that the fact that everybody knows, like I was reading that article last night, like these people know what color orb it is and where it comes from. How are they sourcing this information? How the hell do they know that? You know, there was nothing there. All right, so I want to talk to you about something. Let's get into some psychology here, Dan. As we head into the weekend, open lines tomorrow night. You know who's coming on tomorrow night?
Who's coming on tomorrow night?
Check this out: the rabble rouser, the skeptic, the Long Beach skeptic. Alex Exum's coming back on to stir up crap again, and he's bringing his buddy that calls into a show all the time that actually is more like us, Carlton. So we're going to have a debate. I don't know if you want to be a part of that or not. Do you want to come on too? It might get heated, man. We might just start screaming at each other.
I don't know, man. 2 New Yorkers and a freaking
and the Long Beach All-Star. Yeah.
Like, what the hell is wrong with you?
No, but it'll get heated because Alex has a way of doing that. But I was looking at this thing I keep seeing on the Facebook and YouTube and everything, and it's narcissist this and narcissist that, and I'm like, why do I keep seeing this narcissist thing come up? So I'm figuring when stuff like that in your life comes up a lot, when you see like numbers or a certain word come up a lot, you got to start paying attention to it. So I looked into it, and I'm confused about narcissism, honestly, because if you go on YouTube, there's a thing that says, well, these are 5 signs of a narcissist, or 3 things that a narcissist won't do, or whatever. And it's just not that simple, because it seems like everybody I've ever met in my life has characteristics of a narcissist. So and I need you to help me with this, Dan. So what I've got mainly from this is that a narcissist feels like, because I called my dad one like a week ago, and I don't know why, but now I do. They feel like they're in this tower looking down on everybody. That's what it feels like when you talk to them. Or if you feel like you got to walk on eggshells around them, right? That's the only thing that I can understand about it so far. Is there not, like, can you define a narcissist by telling me what the hell the opposite of narcissism is? What would be the opposite of it?
A person who is selfless, a person who is empathic, a person who is more into other people, and the love of themselves is as far as allowing themselves to be with other people and being open to other people, and then, being cooperative and stuff like that, being loving and kind, as opposed to being chiding and backbiting or and stuff like that, to the point where it's like just you don't even want to be around them, but the opposite is, you want to be around them. Yeah. You like their energy. Their energy is, the opposite of a narcissist is the kind of person that you want to be around. You want in your life. You would appreciate more in your life.
Right. Totally. I got you. But does that mean that narcissists like to hang out together? Would 2 narcissists be happy with each other?
It's been coming to my experience that the development, there's social engineering going on, and it's been going on for quite some time now, ever since the book Propaganda and Popular Opinion came out by Edward Bernays. And the thing is that, it's propagating narcissism, which propagates divisionism, which is, so long as I don't include you in my thought process, then I can stay, separate from you. You're wrong and I'm right, and that's all there is to it. And it becomes more and more prevalent in society when there's engineering it to be such. So if you have like these really good sites and accounts and stuff like that propagate good information and good news, and you just feel good watching this stuff, like people doing good things and good deeds and stuff like that, like motorcyclists, pulling off the side of the road to help a veteran, get across the street. And that's just, a simple, sample. But, stuff like that makes you feel good. Those kinds of things don't show up in your feed. And it's happening all the time.
Right.
You know, and a lot of people, what they don't do is they're propagating this air of divisionism, this air of, you know, narcissism, where everybody's into this selfie culture. You know, that's how that became another propaganda of freaking, you know, narcissism. Because who the hell cares that your picture is up there? You're sucking up my bandwidth. Get the hell off of me with this crap. You know, I don't need to see 15,000 pictures of your mug. I really don't. You know, tell me what's going on with you. Tell me what's going on with your heart and stuff like that. More interested to know who you are than what you are.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, because I got to thinking about that, the relationship the relationship I had with my father. Like, even to this day, man, he's never apologized for anything that he's done, like, ever. There's that. There's the toxicity of it, you know, and it all stems, in those cases, it all stems from where they came from. And this is what we were talking about the other night. Is like, you got to stop that vicious cycle. You know, if it doesn't end with you, then when is it going to stop? You know, if you're aware of it and you realize that this is not the way that it could be, you know, that there is a better way, well, then why am I propagating this to continue? You know what I mean? So maybe I should be aware of how I am and how my actions are and how my thoughts are, and give myself a moment to actually think before I talk. All right. So DJ, aka Dennis, is saying narcissistic personality disorder, according to the Mayo Clinic, is one of several types of personality disorders. It's a mental condition in which people have an inflated sense of their own importance, a deep need for excessive attention and admiration, troubled relationships, and a lack of empathy for others. And then he said, think Trump. Okay. So some of the symptoms are, they have an exaggerated sense of self-importance. Did I say that right? An exaggerated sense of self-importance. They have a sense of entitlement and require constant excessive admiration. They expect to be recognized as superior even without achievements that warrant it. They exaggerate achievements and talents. They are preoccupied with fantasies about success, power, brilliance, beauty, or the perfect mate. There's no such thing as that. Sorry. They believe they are superior and can only associate with equally special people. Wow.
What's an egomaniac with a insecurity problem?
Right. They monopolize conversations and belittle or look down on people they perceive as inferior. I've been around that too. But see, they expect special favors and unquestioning compliance with their expectations. They take advantage of others to get what they want. They have an inability or unwillingness to recognize the needs and feelings of others.
They demand respect without giving any.
Right. Exactly. That's a big no-no for me. They're envious of others and believe others envy them. They behave in an arrogant or haughty manner, coming across as conceited, boastful, and pretentious, and insist on having the best of everything, for instance, the best car or office. Okay. I have never met anybody that has all these symptoms, but I know a lot of people that have some of these symptoms. So I think that's why narcissism confuses me, you know, because I think we're just using this word too much, where we're just labeling everybody a damn narcissist anytime they have a symptom like this. Like, if you've got all of these symptoms, I can't imagine being around anybody like that.
They're out there.
Really?
Yes, they are out there. They're totally out there. But the thing is that, you know, you're right. You have a lot of people have these tendencies. You know what I mean? And if you look around anywhere, you know, everybody's got these tendencies, and some people are aware of them. You know, I used to. I had to ask a question one time, and it used to bug me. I told you about, you know, how my face used to get punched in and slapped and all that crap to the point where I didn't like it anymore. Yeah. But it was a time when I was young, and I was like, you know, I couldn't go past like a window or something just to make sure that my hair was in the right, you know, position and stuff like that. And I was wondering if that was, you know, a sense of vanity, was a sense of narcissism, and so I was corrected, and it was like, oh, it depends on how far you take it. I was like, oh, okay. And it's true, you're talking about extremes, but the thing is that, extremes do not always define, or it's not always necessary to have extremes in order for these tendencies to be defined.
Yeah. Yeah, I can tell you this, like, there's this other thing too that I'm learning about, and I know you guys are laughing like, dude, you're just learning about this, but yeah, I am. I don't know everything. Sorry. But like this thing called gaslighting, you heard of that too, right?
Experienced it firsthand. Don't you make me think I'm crazy. Do not change my words on me, and do not act like I did not say what I said. Right. I know what I said.
Yeah, so this I do understand and have experienced. Like, you are constantly reminded of your flaws. One of the clearest signs of gaslighting occurs when in a personal relationship or with friends or at a workplace, you're regularly subjected to reminders of your shortcomings, weaknesses, and undesirability. You feel like there's always something wrong with you and what you do, and that you'd never be good enough. So when you really feel like you got to walk on the eggshells around somebody, I think that's a sign, right? Many gaslighting charges are generalized, disparaging remarks, and negative stereotypes. The gaslighter makes these accusations not to discuss issues or solve problems, but to put the victim on the defensive. By attacking you on a personal level and causing you to feel vulnerable, the gaslighter creates a power disparity in the relationship from which you can then be exploited to their advantage. That's some twisted stuff, man.
You just described my ex.
So you often feel insecure or uncertain. In a gaslighting relationship, you frequently feel anxious and unsure of yourself. You may feel insecure about how you should behave, uncertain regarding what is expected of you, and anxious over when the gaslighter will act up again. You might even question your worth as an individual, that somehow you're not good enough as a partner or a friend or a child, employee, or etc. There it is. You feel like you're walking on eggshells. I hate that. The gaslighter rarely admits flaws and is highly aggressive when criticized. You make self-disparaging remarks. Here's an example. Anonymous example. I lived in a household where women were routinely treated as second class. For a long time, I bought into the negative stereotype and would make sexist and racist remarks about myself and other women. Only after I moved out did I realize that I had been bamboozled. See, I don't make that. That's,
there more to that?
Look, okay. All of this stuff, these games or whatever the hell this is, it just doesn't feel real to me, man. It feels twisted. It feels, maybe that's why I stay in the shack all the time, because it just feels like nobody's being genuine when you're doing this stuff, man. Like, I lived in a household where women were routinely treated as second class. For a long time, I bought into that stereotype and would make sexist and racist remarks. Only after I moved out did I realize I had been bamboozled. Make self-disparaging remarks. So you talk bad about yourself, and then, let me see here. Since the pathological gaslighter's aim is to distort your perception and your identity, after a time of persistent ridicule, you may begin to question yourself and wonder if some of the gaslighter's negative comments and accusations about you are true. You might begin to think and feel negatively about yourself, make self-depreciating remarks, and reject your own qualities, values, and background. One of the most common types of self-disparaging remarks is saying, "I'm sorry," even when you're clearly on the receiving end of mistreatment as a class. Okay. So this is what I guess I was trying to talk about the other night when I was saying, like, stand in your truth, This is
even if it means, getting off the eggshells.
Despite poor treatment, you look to the gaslighter for acceptance, approval, and validation. You hide and excuse their coercion. You feel stuck and or alone. Now,
tough one. That's a tough one.
What if you do? What happens though when?
We're running out of
this
time.
is confusing to me, man. We'll have to pick this up tomorrow or something, because this is the most confusing stuff to me in the world. It seems like a lot of games and BS, you know. I don't know why people just can't say what they really feel. Like if you're angry, say you're angry.
Because they feel like crap about themselves. They have what they're projecting is what the turmoil that's going on with them themselves. And in 9 times out of 10, it's just like I said before. It's because of the past and the upbringing that they went through. You know, it's just like nobody comes into this feeling like that straight off the bat, like unless they've been traumatized.
Like a past relationship or being raised
past relationship, the way that we're raised, exactly. It's conditioned.
All right.
Unless you just came out like Satan, well, that's a different story.
Well, I don't know. I'm trying to learn about all this stuff, and it just feels crazy to me. It feels like I'm around the Joker and I'm on acid all the time trying to figure it out, you know. It don't feel stable to me.
Can't reason with insanity is how I say it. Try to get as crazy as the crazy person and you wind up going insane.
Well, I hope that you come out tomorrow night, man. And I hope that I want to tell everybody, and I do mean every single one of you that's listening, like, you know, stand in your truth. We're not all perfect. We make mistakes. When you screw up, say you're sorry, if you really feel sorry. And if you know, as long as you're trying to get better, don't worry about all this stuff. Don't let anybody ever make you feel like you're inferior or evil or whatever, or not good enough or less than, because you're not. You're perfect the way you are. As long as you're trying to grow and improve, to me, you're good. So apparently there's a lot of this stuff going around, or Facebook is doing what you're talking about, like social engineering. You never know.
They all are.
They could be trying to confuse us too. Yeah.
Yep. Well, good night. Thank you for all.
Don't copy the show. Chronox, all that stuff. Bundy, Dan, Dennis, Pancho, Don. Thank you all in the chat room. We'll see you tomorrow night. Open lines. Big time debates going on tomorrow night. Y'all better be a part of it. See you then. Good night.
And opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of the Fringe FM, KTLK Digital Broadcasting, its sponsors, affiliates, or staff. Listener discretion is advised.